Astonishing Legends Network.
If you are feeling suicidal, thinking about hurting yourself, or concerned that someone you know may be in danger of hurting himself or herself, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK, 1-800-273-8255. It is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and is staffed by certified crisis response professionals. Thanks to our sponsors and Patreon supporters, Astonishing Legends is free to listen to. We appreciate your support of them and us.
Tonight's astonishing legend truly fits the title of our show. It plays out exactly like the opening scene of a 1970s neo-noir film. Imagine a stark, wide shot of the New Mexico desert in early March. The wind whips across a remote, rugged stretch of mesa country, about 24 miles outside of a small Route 66 town called Santa Rosa. Sitting right in the middle of all that isolated scrub brush and rock is a gray, older Volkswagen Beetle. It's locked and abandoned. And to get it out there, way off the main highway, you have to really mean it. It's not the kind of place you just accidentally pull over to stretch your legs. When the local authorities finally pop the locks on the Beetle, they don't find a crime scene. They find a perfectly preserved time capsule of a man's life. Sitting right there on the front passenger seat is a 12-string Guild acoustic guitar. Next to it, a wallet with a California driver's license, a pile of clothes, and a cardboard box loaded with unsold vinyl records. To the state police, it just looks like a broken-down commuter who decided to hitch a ride, albeit broken down in a very out-of-the-way place. But to anyone who actually knows the guy on the driver's license, the guitar changes the entire equation. A working musician doesn't leave his prized instrument sitting in a freezing car in the middle of nowhere, unless he either didn't voluntarily leave the car, or he's not planning on coming back to play it ever again. 26 miles away, sitting on a dresser at the La Mesa Hotel, is a room key. The bed hasn't been slept in, and just a couple of days prior, a cryptic phone call was placed from that town back to a wife in Los Angeles. The guy on the line said he'd just been pulled over, and when she pressed him, asking what was wrong, he simply told her she wouldn't believe him if he tried to explain it. Then he said, "Don't worry about it," and promised he'd call her later from Nashville. That call never came. Which brings us back to the cardboard box locked inside the car. The album pressed on those records is called U.F.O. If you've listened to Astonishing Legends for a while, you've heard us mention it on the show several times. It's a pretty amazing album. It was recorded 6 years earlier in a Hollywood studio, backed by some of the most legendary session players in the business, famously known as the Wrecking Crew. If you drop a needle on the vinyl, you'll hear a man singing about packing up and driving out into the desert, and about looking up at the sky and asking if something in it came by UFO. Aristotle laid down the philosophical rule that art imitates life. It's a comforting thought. The idea that a musician is simply observing the everyday world around him and reflecting it back to us in a song. But centuries later, Oscar Wilde famously inverted that idea, warning that life actually imitates art. And every now and then, Wilde is proven right in the darkest way possible. In tonight's legend, a talented musician having a difficult time with his career writes the exact blueprint for his own vanishing act, presses it into wax, and then walks out into the New Mexico desert, creating his own reality.
Welcome back to Astonishing Legends. I'm Scott Philbrook, and this is Forrest Burgess.
When I heard that, I knew he wasn't coming back. No matter what, Jim would never have left his guitar. Al Dobbs, friend and co-founder of Monty Records, the label that released Jim Sullivan's debut album, U.F.O.
Join us tonight for a long overdue episode on the disappearance of talented musician Jim Sullivan. So tonight we're looking at the bizarre disappearance of a musician who seemingly evaporated into thin air, which several of them have done, like Glenn Miller. There's others.
Oh, yes.
But this story is particularly fascinating. Back in 1975, a talented California musician named Jim Sullivan packed up his Volkswagen Beetle, drove out toward the New Mexico desert on his way to Tennessee, and simply vanished. Now, I personally, Forrest, I don't want to call you out on your age, but I was 7 years old at the time, living in Denver, Colorado. I don't remember anything about this in the news. The news in Denver at that time was how dirty the air was, because it was like
it's the mile high.
It was horrible. Yeah.
Smog club.
It trapped smog, and the cars were all gross polluters, and it was really bad. They got that cleaned up. It's not an issue there anymore. Now you just, everywhere you go, you smell weed. But Denver is beautiful.
That's true.
But as a kid, I remember things. I remember when Star Wars came out and stuff like that, which I also saw in Denver, but I don't remember hearing anything about Jim Sullivan, but this kind of music wasn't on my radar at that age. I actually hadn't heard of him until we started doing Astonishing Legends.
Yeah, I'd not heard of him either, but since we've been wanting to cover this story for a very long time. We first mentioned him almost 10 years ago in part 2 of our series on the Somerton Man, if you can believe that. And do you know the context? Do you remember why he was mentioned?
We were talking about disappearances, and it was just particularly related to the Somerton Man, and just like this idea of a person being found. Of course, in this case, we don't have a body.
Right.
But just sort of mysterious circumstances surrounding a person and an unsolved mystery at the time. Of course, now a lot of things have been figured out about the Somerton Man since then, but Jim Sullivan, still nothing.
That's true. Now, occasionally, people, as you know them, especially ones with some notoriety, go missing. People take notice. Back then in the 70s, of course, we weren't all as connected with our information as we are now. And like everything else, there's good and bad things about that. There's a lot of stuff I don't need to hear about these days. And I'm being hit over the head with it. And in other cases, it's easier to do research like this. So it's like everything's got ups and down sides to it. But back then, unless it made the paper, and we were actually just talking about that phenomenon, you could say, about strangeness, disappearances, cryptid sightings, and things like that with Jeremiah Byron of the Bigfoot Society, and that, when these things happen, like Momo, back in the day, it's like sometimes it makes the local and regional papers, and then sometimes it's picked up nationally on the news wires.
That's
and then, like I said, without fail, it seems, there's always a Japanese news crew who's heard of it, and they've come and flown here, to cover it because, as we were saying, in that Patreon episode we did of the junk drawer, is that I'm glad they have an interest in this and that they're documenting it in a way. And so back then, it's like you'll hear about these things, they kind of happen, but it was more regional. And so typically when Scott and I will start to research something, we first look for newspaper articles, anything we can find, and we'll notice how far those news articles spread. I'm talking geographically. And so it's usually regional, like sometimes the largest city around there will pick it up and run something. So it's also fascinating how this kind of news spreads. But to your point, I don't remember this either. It was
you were a little bit older than me.
I think I would have been about 10.
Yeah.
I was certainly interested in these kinds of stories at that age, but I read the paper occasionally. My dad read it a lot more, but you usually didn't find things like that in the paper.
Yeah, I think this was kind of a quiet disappearance, really.
Yeah, I think there's not a lot of information that goes with it.
He wasn't a big star.
No, exactly. Yeah. Nowadays, it's also one of those things culturally, I think, in the United States, with more people being, music nerds of sorts, they'll go back and rediscover, and there's a reappreciation of some of these more obscure musicians and their work. And this is one of those cases, I think, like, man, this guy's pretty good. And then there's some that, like I said, all growing up, we were just mostly aware of what was being played on AM radio, transistor radios that we would strap to our bikes and ride around.
Right.
That was the early in-car audio entertainment
I had a
system.
Radio Shack. I had this like a big red box that was right on the handlebars, and it had a horn button, a yellow button that said horn. And it played music.
Oh, I remember those. Yes.
But then the horn also could play like 100 different various songs. And
you unscrew the bottom bracket, it clamped onto the handlebars,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
Yes, I do remember those. Let me ask you this, though. What was your opinion then if it was somebody like John Prine who'd gone missing? He was much more well-known. I think you'd hear about that more, even though, like I said, growing up, I'd not heard of John Prine until I was an adult, and then started to, again, that reappreciation or back appreciation.
Yeah. I think it would have been a lot bigger news. It's so funny you should say that. You can't see it here, but today I literally had 5 John Prine albums delivered, like new
Oh,
pressings.
really?
Yeah, I'm so
very
excited.
cool.
But what folks don't know, we're both very big fans of John Prine, and he's passed away now. But one of the cool things that we got to do as friends was go see him perform at the Greek Theater.
Yeah,
when we
yeah.
were, both still living in Los Angeles before I moved
Right.
away. So it was a lot of fun. It was one of his last shows, so that was pretty amazing.
Right.
So look him up. If you don't know who John Prine is, look him up. He's written more songs that you know and didn't even realize he'd written.
Yeah.
Well, with Jim Sullivan here, who you'll hear us refer to simply as Jim tonight, when he disappeared, he left behind a trail of physical evidence that just doesn't add up for a guy who was supposedly driving to Nashville to start a new chapter in his career.
Right. And what makes this one so incredibly strange is what he did 6 years earlier. Because before his car was found abandoned about 25 miles or so off Route 66, most people here in the States at least, and a lot of our UK folks and folks around the world have heard about that. When they take a road trip to the US, they'll want to drive that, and it's highly recommended.
Yes.
But Route 66 is out in the middle of the desert, if you don't know. There's a famous song about that, which I wish we could play here without infringing
I know
royalties.
we can't play any fun songs.
I know.
We can't afford it.
But Route 66, at this location here with Jim, he was in a Los Angeles studio recording an album called U.F.O. And on that record, he essentially sang about this exact chain of events. And just a quick aside here. Again, we've seen the scenario before where somebody goes missing. Conversely, it's more rare, but it does happen. It made me think about the Somerton Man when somebody shows up with no history or story. They're unidentified. And I wonder if Jim is somewhere in an alternate reality, and people are like, "Who's this guy?" Like he just popped into existence there with no background, hopefully alive. But you got to figure if things go out, the things should be coming back in too.
Before we try to wrap our heads around what happened here, we need to get to know Jim Sullivan a little bit. Jim was born in Nebraska in 1939. He was the 7th son in a working class family, and they ended up moving out to San Diego right in the middle of World War II.
Yeah, which if we stop for a minute to look at this through the lens of the paranormal, imagine us doing that. That 7th son thing is an interesting detail. When we had that in our notes, it reminded me the 7th son of a 7th son.
That's
exactly
exactly what we're talking about.
Okay,
here.
so being the 7th son carries some mythological weight in reality here. In a lot of different folkloric traditions, the 7th son is said to be born with special gifts. We're talking about things like second sight, prophetic abilities, or unique, I guess, innate connection to the supernatural. And wasn't it was it Sheena Easton? That's also a lyric, the 7th son of a 7th son, speaking of music.
Yes, that's super interesting.
Well, yeah, and tying into that Celtic folklore and Irish tradition, if you look at that, the 7th son is historically believed to be a natural healer, someone who can cure ailments just by touch. And then there's a name for that. I didn't write that down, but there is a name for that ability. And also psychic impressions by touch.
Right.
But this goes deeper than that. They're also said to possess clairvoyance, or the ability to see things that haven't happened yet. That's called psychometry or clairtangency, sometimes called clear touching, where you can touch an object or a person and gain some psychic insight.
Okay.
You can prophesy. And then what's really fascinating for our specific case here is how this 7th son idea has been translated into American folk magic, which of course has a lot to do with Scotch-Irish history and tradition.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're talking generations embedded into American culture, Appalachian folklore, folk music, and folk magic.
Right, like the Willie Dixon song, The 7th Son.
Yeah, that's right. That's another one. Exactly.
Listen to these lyrics from that song. This is pretty amazing. Well, I'm not singing, folks. Sorry. I'm a
I
singer,
was getting
so
ready. I just...
No, I get in trouble. In my own car, my family's like, no, they like do a tuck and roll while the car's going down the highway.
Oh.
But listen to these lyrics of Willie Dixon song. Well, I can tell your future before it comes to pass, and I can do things for you that make your heart feel glad. Look at the skies and predict the rain. I can tell when a woman's got another man. I'm the one, yes, I'm the one. I'm the one, I'm the one. I'm the one they call the 7th son.
Well, not too shabby, my friend. And I think you just need some guitar accompaniment. But I was just curious. So I just quickly Googled this because I do remember some significance, but I didn't want to screw this up. But just the notes here you get from Googling 7th son and Bible, the 7th son of the Bible. What that signifies generally is some kind of spiritual apotheosis or some kind of perfection in a spiritual way, completion or a new beginning, or being chosen as a special servant to the Lord. And when it comes to Hebrew thinking and philosophy, 7 is the number of perfection. So the seventh born sons of the seventh position often feature prominently, like Gad, the seventh son of Jacob of Israel, and Enoch, the seventh son from Adam.
And Sting sang that song, Love is the Seventh Wave.
There you go. So 7, yeah, that's why 7 is a lucky number. It's a big deal, especially a lot in cultural history here, which a lot comes from the Bible. But also Enoch, very talk about the holder of secrets and biblical lore. So yeah, there's a lot of weight behind this concept, I think, is what Scott is talking about. And when it comes to what we're saying about folk traditions in American hoodoo and blues traditions, the seventh son is essentially, you could say, like a born mystic. He can see the future. As we said, he can heal the sick, and they're operating on a different level, a different spiritual frequency than the average person here. So in the 50s, when Willie Dixon wrote that blues track, it kind of became a staple of American music lore, especially with that genre of music.
Yeah, a little quick patented AL tangent here tonight, which there are a few of to talk about tonight. And I think I've mentioned this on the show before, but a long time ago, when I was an assistant editor working commercials and music videos, Michael Bay used to come in a lot to the company I worked at. And because he was directing so many music videos, one of the record labels had given him like 20 blues box CD sets. And he brought them into our facility and was like, anyone can have these that wants them. And I took the whole thing. It was a box. I just literally picked it up and put it in my car immediately. Wow. And that's how I really got to know Willie Dixon, as well as Muddy Waters. Yeah. All those guys. And I know the seventh son from that.
Well, so anyway.
But I have them. I still have them.
No, that's very cool. And I'm glad it was an introduction to you with a curious little celebrity story that goes with it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the prophecy here, or I guess just how prophetic Jim's music ended up being. You know, he's singing about UFOs and past lives and seemingly predicting his own disappearance. So maybe that's a little of that seventh son thing chiming in here.
Yeah, it does make sense when you think about it. And it's an extra dimension to this story that when we first started doing research on it, I hadn't understood. And when I was like, oh, he's the seventh son of this family, that was pretty interesting. So let's talk a little bit about what Jim looked like. He's a big dude. Yeah. I think 6'2" or even taller, like me. I'm 6'2". I'm not taller than that. He'd been the quarterback of his high school football team, unlike me.
Oh, really?
He played in a local band called The Survivors, and he married the homecoming queen, Barbara. It's all straight out of a John Hughes movie. But once he got serious about the guitar, that run-of-the-mill American dream just didn't work for him anymore. His son, Chris, actually told an interviewer that the idea of Jim being a square and working for somebody else was probably as repulsive to him as cutting off his own hand. He just wasn't into that.
A bit extreme. But I could see the interesting also, The Survivors, I guess, as a band name.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of musicians relate to that 9-to-5 cubicle kind of sitting life is not for them. And it's being open and free and creating your music that you have inside you and following your dream. And it's just that drive to get the music out of you that you got to do it. And I just, for most folks, I just hope it's good, because I've heard some people, it's like, best to just keep that inside still. But
nobody needs to hear that.
No, but I'm glad I'm glad to have a space to perform, especially nowadays, you know, with social media, it's like people can attain that dream. But it's like The Voice or any of these shows, and how often he's like, I gave up everything and I just moved out here with a dream. And then, you know, sometimes that works, but a lot of times it's impractical, but you got to do it. You got to try.
So do you have any car buying stories where having some extra info or experience has come in handy for you?
Oh, yeah, I do. Well, you know, that and knowing how to negotiate. So back when I had saved up enough money to buy my first new car, I had my dad come with me to the dealership because he knew a lot about cars and had gone through this buying process many times before. So we get down to the check writing phase, and the sales guy gets out that 4-square sheet of paper. You know, the sales tactic where the top left square is for the total purchase price, top right is for the trade-in value of your old car, bottom left is for your down payment, and bottom right square is for how much you want to pay monthly.
Oh, yeah. The gag there is to get you to focus on how much you want to pay monthly while distracting you from the actual total cost you'll end up paying or some other figure that seems more appealing, not to mention the interest rate, which they try to not talk about at all.
That's right. And the tax is a nasty surprise. Well, exactly.
Yeah.
So, my dad knew this and told the salesman he'd like to see another $1,000 added to the value of our trade-in because he knew the real Blue Book value. And the sales guy didn't hesitate. He just said with a smile, okay, that's fine. And bam, saved $1,000 right there. Now, don't get me wrong. I really like the guy and the dealership, and I was happy with the deal in the car. But you got to remember that their job is to get as much money out of you for the car, not to save you money. It's the buyer's responsibility to get the best deal they can for themselves.
Yeah, well, that can be really nerve-wracking and tricky. But fortunately, with the Car Gurus app set on dealership mode, it's like having an expert negotiator and cheat sheet right there with you at the dealership. You're the one in control. With Car Gurus, you can instantly compare the car you're looking at to similar options, then check the price history, deal ratings, and then estimate your final price.
Yep, and there's no better feeling than feeling confident you're getting the best deal possible. You certainly don't want to go in blind, which is a terrible feeling.
It really is, but you can feel good knowing they have your back. And with Car Gurus Discover, you don't have to mess with filters. All you do is just simply type in what you want in your own words, and Discover instantly brings up real listings that match exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, Car Gurus is actually fun to use because it's like magic. Magic that's saving you money.
It's no wonder Car Gurus is the #1 most visited car shopping site according to SimilarWeb's estimated traffic data. And it doesn't hurt that Car Gurus has the biggest selection of cars with more than 4 million listings, making it easier than ever to find the right car and the right deal.
Buy or sell your next car today with Car Gurus at cargurus.com.
Go to cargurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal.
That's cargurus.com.
Cargurus.com. Well, gas prices are through the roof right now, but there are other ways that you can save money on life's necessities, like your wireless service. Because as much as you like your hard-earned money, those big wireless carriers like it even more.
Yeah, they do. And if you don't believe us, just take a look at that wireless bill you've been afraid to open for a while now. Because it ain't pretty.
If you're tired of spending hundreds on crazy high wireless bills, bogus fees, and free perks that cost you more in the long run, then a premium wireless plan from Mint Mobile for $15 a month might be right for you.
Yeah, we've both been using Mint Mobile for nearly a decade now. It's crazy to think about that.
Ever since they first sponsored the show, it's been rock solid. I actually put my wife and son on Mint a while back too. When you look at what we used to pay those big carriers for 3 lines versus what we pay now, the savings for us have been in the thousands of dollars.
And you never feel like you're sacrificing quality either. The service and coverage are phenomenal compared to our old providers. You really need to stop overpaying for wireless just because that's how it's always been. Mint exists purely to fix that.
And Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month.
Plus, all plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network.
And it's so easy to switch. Bring your own phone and number, activate with eSIM in minutes, and start saving immediately. No long-term contracts, no hassle.
Just a clean break. Ditch overpriced wireless and get 3 months of premium wireless service from Mint Mobile for $15 a month.
If you like your money, Mint Mobile is for you. Shop plans at mintmobile.com/AL. That's mintmobile.com/AL.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month 5GB plan required.
Equivalent to $15 a month.
New customer offer for first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available.
Taxes and fees extra.
See Mint Mobile for details.
Hi, I'm Michael, part-time zookeeper and full-time mystery hunter. And I can tell you for a fact that my animals love Astonishing Legends. So let's get back to the show.
This musician thing definitely caused some friction for Jim and his wife, Barbara. For a while, she was actually the primary breadwinner for them. She got a job working as a secretary down at Capitol Records after they moved to L.A. from San Diego. So Jim's spending his days writing songs and just absorbing records. He's listening to people like Karen Dalton and one of our favorite artists that we were just talking about, John Prine.
Right.
Then at night, he's out grinding away at these club gigs, and eventually he becomes a regular fixture out at a spot in Malibu called The Raft. And he performed there regularly. He had this magnetic personality, a huge handlebar mustache, and a lot of friends. His friends were like Harry Dean Stanton, who folks may know from Repo Man and Alien, just a legend, and also Dennis Hopper, who actually helped him land an uncredited cameo in Easy Rider. So
Oh,
Jim
that's
Sullivan
right.
is in Easy Rider, uncredited.
Do you remember what scene? I mean, it's been a long time.
Yeah,
since
it's
I've
like
seen
a
it.
party scene. He's playing an instrument, like in the background at a party.
Yeah, that was a really vibrant scene. Talking about Harry Dean Stanton also being a musician and that kind of.
Yes.
I love these stories about those early days and how many famous people or people who end up being famous kind of come together. There's energy that I think that brings folks like that and that creative spirit. And the story is also reminding me a little bit about, I don't know how much you know about, speaking of country rock or folk rock here, Graham Parsons,
Yes.
who was a member of the Byrds, also the Flying Burrito Brothers. There's also a really interesting story about him, I think in September of 1973, but out in Joshua Tree, there's a place called Cap Rock, which looks like a cap. Supposedly the story goes is that his manager, when he passed away, Graham Parsons, his manager, Phil Kaufman, and some, I think a couple of other friends stole his body because he wanted to be cremated out there, which is illegal. You're not supposed to do that, but they stole him and, some things were left behind, like a guitar and things like that out in Joshua Tree National Park here in California. Part of the legend, which is also kind of weird, at that spot, which is a little bit of an indentation into the rock where he was supposedly cremated, you can see a natural fold in the rock where it does look like the initials GP. So I can attest that that is there and kind of strange.
And that was just a year or two earlier than this. So there's some important dimension to this there.
Like I said, it was a very magical time, especially in the Southern California and southwestern desert area. And we've talked about this before, but starting since the 60s, you had a lot of migration of creative types, some real talented people and some real wackos and a lot of cult activity migrating towards that area. So there was a spiritual, metaphysical calling almost. And so then unfortunately you have people like Charles Manson also being called, self-reported folk rockists, also notably getting the attention of Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys, things like that. So it was a very vibrant time. But talking about Jim, he knew the $6 million man and Fall Guy star Lee Majors. That's what I'm talking about. You're rubbing elbows with the elite of late 60s counterculture here. Actors, musicians, artists. And while it predates us, obviously, apparently the Raft in Malibu was a great launch pad. Now, had you ever heard of that establishment?
I hadn't.
I hadn't either.
No, I hadn't. And, we didn't spend a lot of time in Malibu. It was priced out of it when we were living in LA. But we did go every now and then and, there was a Nobu over there you go eat at sometimes and stuff like that, all, before the recent horrific fires. But I never heard in the time I was over there about the Raft or, we were at the Malibu Country Mart. You would go there.
Yeah. But how did the record industry, from your notes here, how did they approach Jim, or how do they feel about him, like trying to break in?
Well, unfortunately, for whatever reason, they weren't really taking notice of him. But if you remember, his wife Barbara worked at Capitol Records. Her boss, a guy named John Rankin, genuinely believed in his music. Rankin tried to get the label executives at Capitol to pay attention, but he didn't have enough pull at the time. However, there's this guy named Al Dobbs who catches one of Jim's show. Dobbs was an actor who was paying his bills by working as a cue card holder for Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In.
Yes.
Which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
This was a hit sketch comedy show from the late 60s and early 70s. And Al, or Dobbs, as you might hear us call him the rest of the episode, he heard Jim play at the Raft and he became determined to help him get a record made. However, Dobbs is a cue card guy and an actor, struggling actor, so he doesn't have a record label. He went around and he raised money from friends and co-founded a tiny record label of his own called Monnie, Monnie.
Oh, very cool. And speaking of iconic LA locations, if you're wondering what the Capitol building looks like, I'm sure you've seen it in many films and photos.
Yes.
It's the building that's round, in Hollywood at the kind of the northern edge there before you get into the Hollywood Hills, that is round and looks like stacks. So the idea is that it looks like a stack of records.
And at the top, there's a spire that's supposed to be a representation of a record needle.
Yeah. So cool idea. But anyway, that's the very famous Capitol Records building. All kinds of music history in and around that building. I think Elvis Costello, before he was known by anybody, he stood outside the doors there with a guitar and a backpack amp, battery-powered amp, and just played, hoping somebody would notice him. And look at him today. So sometimes that works. But so anyway, getting back to Al here, He's a cue card guy, an actor, and he hears Jim play, and then he decides, well, I'm going to start a record label just to get you recorded.
Yeah, and apparently he didn't cut corners in the studio either. He managed to recruit some of the best session musicians on the planet to back Jim up. He got Jimmy Bond, Don Randy, and Earl Palmer.
Right.
These guys were core members of the famed session group, the Wrecking Crew. You just look them up. You could do a 10-part series just on these dudes about all of the famous music that they are playing on. These are the studio musicians behind practically everybody back then.
Yeah.
So they went in the studio, they cut Jim's debut album, U.F.O. That comes out in 1969. It's amazing. People have compared the sound of it to folks like Nick Drake, Richie Havens, and who you just mentioned, Graham Parsons. Yeah. I actually have it on vinyl. It's one of the best sounding albums I own. I listen to it on the regular.
Wow, that is cool. You're going to have to, I was gonna say, make me a cassette tape, Scott, of that.
I can. I still have all the gear needed to do that. I could make a tape for you.
My SUV is old enough that it does have a cassette and a CD player combo in it.
You know what? If I'm not mistaken, I think it's illegal for me to make a tape of it and give you a tape of the record. I think there's a rights problem there.
Yeah, it might be.
I'm not doing that.
Oh, I see. Officially, no. Okay. All right. Very good. We'll just pass on here. For folks, though, that you'll maybe have heard the term the Wrecking Crew. And as Scott just mentioned here, just a little tiny bit of background on how legendary they were, but also unknown. Yeah. They weren't meant to be known. These are top tier session musicians, meaning they're not the big stars, but they played and were requested by big stars. They played with them and on their albums. Reportedly, I remember Glenn Campbell was supposedly a member of the Wrecking Crew. He was just a phenomenal guitarist as well. And they ended up being connected to Phil Spector and that Wall of Sound principle here. And these guys could play anything. But the other one, which you may not know, and I think this is true because I think I heard him in an interview. Remember the American version of The Office and Creed Bratton, the really weird, creepy guy? He supposedly was also a member of the Wrecking Crew. So,
oh, wow.
But these guys, they weren't out. It was just kind of a known thing. And it was a high honor to be included because you were the best of the best. So, but talking about that song, I've heard it on Spotify myself. It's really great. And it's got these dramatic sweeping arrangements. There's strings and flutes over a heavy acoustic guitar bed on there. It's very cinematic sounding.
Yeah. And folks, if you want to hear it, like we said earlier, we can't afford the rights. With that license that Forrest was talking about, I did look into it once so that we can play pieces of songs. I think that's $50,000 a year or more.
Yeah.
Not something we can pull off. But, but we can tell you one place to listen if you want, which is a Spotify link that we shortened. We'll have that link in the show notes to the album. But if you want to listen right now, go to tinyurl.com/UFO Jim.
Right.
That's tinyurl.com/UFOJIM. That's to the album overall. But the song UFO is on the album, which we're referencing a lot tonight. That's track 7 on that. That's going to play it on Spotify, by the way. If you don't like Spotify, just look up Jim Sullivan UFO and you'll find it. But getting back to 1969, when they produced it, the problem with the record was financial. Dobbs and his partners just didn't have the money to market it, which is more than half the battle, honestly. Right. So you've got this beautifully produced, haunting folk record with Jim Sullivan and the Wrecking Crew just sitting in boxes. And they're not moving. Dobbs said they used to joke about how few copies it actually sold. So that first attempt for Jim Sullivan, his first album, fizzles out. Now, fast forward a few years to 1972, he gets another shot. Hugh Hefner had just formed Playboy Records, and they asked Jim to join the roster.
Yeah. Playboy tried to get into the music business in the early 70s. I guess it makes sense on paper because it's they're about entertainment, I'm saying, and they have the kind of the notoriety and pull to get stuff done. I mean, they were kind of a known force, but it's a tough sell for the folks actually running the record stores to be connected with that, as you might imagine.
They didn't know where to rack it or what to do with it. So Jim gets in there and he's working with a bassist named Jim Hugart, who wrote the horn and string arrangements for the self-titled albums, just called Jim Sullivan. They shifted gears on this one. It wasn't as folksy as UFO. Yeah. They went for a bigger, heavier rock sound on a lot of it. You got tracks like this swampy blues song called Tomcat. There's another fun track on it with distorted guitars called Amos. But like the Monty release, it just didn't move units. The marketing savvy that Hefner had for the magazines, that didn't translate to the record industry.
Well, I know if you kind of grew up with this social media thing, whatever it is, and YouTube and especially TikTok. Just everybody can get a clip on TikTok. You just
Yeah.
need a phone. And it worked a lot differently, which is why it was much more exclusive, is that you needed this machine to get out
Yeah.
there to be heard and seen. And so, it was much more non-inclusive, you could say. And it took a lot of luck and a lot of talent, but also a lot of money and organization behind an agency behind your talent to get it out there. Otherwise, you're going nowhere with it. So in this case here, strike two, in spite of Jim being really talented, he keeps getting partnered with folks who can't quite get him out of the gate, which I'm sure was probably pretty depressing for him trying to get out there.
Yeah, his career flailed. He started drinking a little too much.
Yeah.
The failure of the Playboy record combined with that was straining things at home.
Right.
Jim's son Chris has said that the second record essentially marked the dissolution of the family.
Yeah.
So Jim and Barbara make the tough decision to try and divide and conquer.
Are they starting to get divorce proceedings here going?
No, that's not what it is. It's more like a Hail Mary pass to save the marriage. He wanted to go and get established in Nashville, where Barbara's sister, I believe, and husband lived. And so he's going to go out there, shack up with them, and then try to get into the music business there, make some real money, then bring Barbara and Chris out to Tennessee and try to put the family back together.
Right, which makes sense. I mean, either that or decades in advance, try to get an army of duck boats together for all those bachelorette parties. That would have been very... that would have been very prescient from him. Just
that's a thing there. That
corner the
hot
market.
Chicken.
When we were there for Podcast Movement a while back, I think we were there with Tess and our good friend Jerry, and just having a
lots of friends,
having a drink and delicious appetizers out on the patio, and it was one every 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah, I almost got run over by one of those. Like it's just giant buses with no roofs, filled with women in matching boas, so they can pick each other out in crowds.
And, but it was constant, just like woo, and then like okay, well that's fun, and then oh no, there's going to be 8 more this hour.
Yes, but predating that, before that was happening, what's cool here is we have these typewritten notes from Barbara, from Jim's wife and widow, that gives us the exact timeline of how things were unfolding when it comes to this legend, this story. On March 4th, 1975, somewhere between noon and 1 p.m., Jim officially left L.A. His ultimate destination wasn't just a vague idea of Tennessee. He was specifically aiming for Goodlettsville, north of Nashville, where Barbara's sister lived. He hits the road with approximately $125 to his name.
It's a shoestring budget, of course, but you know what? Back then, you could get by on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little light for a cross-country move, but your dollar went a lot further then. And what it may mean is that, to make that stretch even further, you might be sleeping in the car a bit, eating on the cheap, and then just trying to make good time.
If you're ever making a road trip like that, you're like, if I go really fast, it'll cost less, but that's like super long days.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't mean fast like speeding, just like today I'm going to drive 20 hours and then I'll be there the next day kind of thing.
That's funny. It just made me remember our good friend Marty from the Queen Mary episode. His father did the reverse trip where he ended up working in Hollywood a bit, but he came out from New Jersey to L.A. In a Volkswagen Beetle, and he drove it straight through. He's that kind of a maniac. It's
That's
like 3
insane.
days straight. Yeah.
I remember talking to him a little bit about some of those crazy.
Yes, the Volkswagen Beetle, and getting that far, and then it's not you've been in the back seat of one. It's not a great place to sleep.
No, the back seat, front seat, there's nowhere to sleep in a Bug, really. You might be more comfortable on the roof or maybe in the frunk. Because, yes, they had frunks. The motor is in the back of the old Volkswagen Bugs, for those of you that don't know that. But you can't lay down. The seat backs are short. I don't even know how you do it. But anyway, he packed it with everything he thought he'd need or what he had left to go start over. It's got his clothes, his wallet, and a cardboard box. This is so sad. Get it filled with copies of both his albums, U.F.O. and the self-titled album, Jim Sullivan.
Yeah.
Riding right there on the front seat next to him is his prized 12-string Guild acoustic guitar that we mentioned earlier. So he drives out of LA and he just pushes through the desert. We're talking about 15 solid hours on the road.
Yeah, 15 hours in an old air-cooled VW Beetle is pretty punishing. We're talking about here no AC, so it's just
that's
it's
right.
Porsche designed engine, as you know.
Yes,
but it's in the back and it has a distinctive sound, and it's just very small and cramped. And of course, for folks that don't know, it's meant to be the people's car of the
the wagon of the folks.
But yeah, I know two guys, of course they were British, but they drove the Alaska Highway in
Okay.
a VW
In a bug?
Yeah, which is
Wow.
actually, I think they were coming down. Their plan was to go all the way down to the tip of South America. It's like, okay,
Okay.
God bless you. Okay. And they were just hardy souls. And
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of vibration, a lot of noise. It's a big, half of a, it's a half of a dome,
Yeah.
and you're pushing a lot of wind going down the highway. And if you've never driven a bug, which they don't really make anymore, but they're classic.
I remember when
we're
they
sh-
went out of production. I remember when they stopped. Towards the end, they were building them mostly in Mexico. I remember that.
That's right. That was
And
one
I
of the last
remembered
plants.
right before they stopped making them, I'm pretty sure the thing I read, because I used to be such a car nut, I'm like, that's mellowing out, thank God, a little bit. But I remember reading that over 1 million of them had been built since they started. And this is, we're not talking about the ones that came along later. Our friend Tommy
That's
has a
right.
newer one. We're talking about the one that preceded that, but 1 million of them. And you used to see them all the time, but you hardly ever see them anymore.
That's right. That's kind of sad, is that they're
and they're
starting
easy to
fail.
fix. Yeah, they're real easy to work on. They're easy to fix. And in some ways, they're indestructible, actually. And I remember, too, back when, like I said, when I used to read the car mags, and I'll move on from this very quickly, but David E. Davis, who was the editor of Automobile Magazine, one of his famous quotes from, this was in the 80s, but he was like, everyone and he's got a waxed mustache, he's on tape saying this. Yeah. He's saying it it's a 60-minute story about the Lamborghini Countach that came out in the 80s. And I remember his quote. He was like, everyone who's worth their salt, who considers themselves an automobile enthusiast, should drive a 12-cylinder car one day and also try to find reverse in a Volkswagen Bug.
I remember that. Yeah. They were kind of fun to drive in a way, but they had a weird shift gate.
You got to push down and to the left and forward, I think, for reverse, which maybe the Volkswagens that are still stick shifts, they may still be that way. I think they might be, but I don't know how many sticks are out there.
Some have that ring around the shifter.
You got to pull the ring up.
You pull the ring up, yeah.
Or this push a button down. No, that's a Volvo, yeah.
The reason that we're talking about this is because it is one of the major pieces of evidence found. It's still in good working order here. We're putting you in the mindset of the determination that Jim had to make it to his destination.
That's right.
And why it seems less likely to he just went hiking and then some notable folks these days going hiking and never being found again.
Circling back to Jim's story, it's March 5th. After crossing into New Mexico, he actually gets pulled over by the cops. They thought he might be driving under the influence. They took him in and gave him a field sobriety test, but he passed it. He wasn't drunk. He passed it with no issues, and they let him go. He was likely just swerving from pure exhaustion after that marathon drive. 15 hours is a long day, and maybe some wonky Volkswagen Bug steering linkage issues.
Yeah, that was.
Why is that guy weaving? It's like, it's a bug. Yeah, but they let him go. They tested him and they let him go.
Also, it's not safe. He should be getting some rest. But like I said, he was just determined. Speaking of that era, Jeff Altman, the comedian, had a joke about his dad being a cranky old guy getting pulled over for driving way too slow, and that and then his dad talking with the cop, I've been driving for 50 years, and the cop said, maybe you should pull over and have a cup of coffee. So that's the idea, is that he's, from everything I've read, he's just very single-mindedly going to do this. A lot of determination. There's a bit of desperation there, but he wasn't aimless.
Yeah.
And so, but anyway, on a marathon trip like that, at some point, I think no matter what, you've got to stop and rest somewhere. So
that's right.
Yeah. So he realizes, maybe this isn't great. I really do need to, just get some rest, pull over here. And depending on the weather, it can be really hot in that car too. So.
And the car might need a break. Today's cars don't care so much about taking breaks, but back then cars sometimes needed to take a break too, especially if you're climbing long hills in the heat, especially in an air-cooled car.
Which means there's no radiator, so there's no fluid going through to cool the engine. It's depending entirely on airflow. Right.
Yeah. Jim pulls off the highway in Santa Rosa, New Mexico. At the time, Santa Rosa was a city of about 2,800 people, and it was heavily dependent on tourists, actually. Before I-40 came along, folks would pull off the famous U.S. touring route, Route 66, and rest there at neon-lit motels or check out the Blue Hole, which is a local artesian well. It's 81 feet deep and world famous as a free diving spot. So that's where a lot of divers will go, or people who are practicing free diving or who are professionals at it will go there and, test out their chops.
Right.
in this natural formation, it's beautiful. You see the pictures of it. Just look it up. The Blue Hole, Santa Rosa. There's lots of pictures of it, but you have to pay a lot of money to go to pools that are that deep if you're practicing free diving. So this is just a hole in the ground. So you can just go out there and hop in.
Right.
I'm sure they charge you, but
that's the if folks have ever heard the very famous song, which isn't played a lot these days, "Get Your Kicks" on Route 66,
on Route 66
or just Route 66 for short here.
Yeah,
that was also an R&B song composed by Bobby Troup in 1946. I didn't realize it was that old, but if you remember, if you are that older of our age here, Bobby Troup was he played one of the doctors on Emergency 51. Do you remember that?
Oh, did he really?
Emergency. Yeah, he had kind of short gray hair. And what's funny is
I know the guy you're talking about. That's the guy that did that song? Wow.
Yeah, he wrote that. Well, he was a great jazz musician. What's funny is that I used to watch a lot of the Perry Masons with my dad because that was his era too. And he's often a character on that. And what's funny, he plays a doctor, a very caring and wise doctor on Emergency, but he always played a beatnik punk on it.
Yes.
He just like super uncaring, very against authority of any kind, just sitting there chain smoking and playing jazz. So that's the guy. But the point is that in that song, he lists a lot of, San Bernardino.
Yes, right.
New Mexico. So he lists a lot of spots in the song to stop off at.
Yeah.
And what Scott's talking about is that eventually parts of Route 66 were bypassed. And the main route came in by the interstate, which was Interstate 40. So that choked off a lot of towns and cool attractions.
Which is a bummer.
Yeah, it is. But that's progress. And if you want to see those things, you have to get off the road.
Yeah.
Okay, but back to Jim at this time when all that was still in place and people did this route drive here. Imagine this guy, he's got his handlebar mustache, not waxed, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And he's playing a 12-string guitar. At that time, he wouldn't really stick out like a sore thumb. He's just another traveler needing a bed. That was a common look back then.
Yeah, and off Route 66, that's when people were out there doing that. So a lot of people are showing up and coming and going, and the local economies of all these little towns were predicated on that transient sort of people passing through. So not necessarily a red flag with him coming through there.
Right.
But Santa Rosa, also not a huge city where you could easily slip through the cracks. There was a retired newspaper reporter named Davy Delgado, and his observation on this was you couldn't steal a piece of bubble gum in that town without everyone knowing about it.
Right.
So Jim finds this place called the La Mesa Motel, checks in to get some rest, but here's the detail that sets up the entire mystery. Police later told Barbara that the bed had never been slept in. And at some point during all this, there's another weird detail.
Yeah.
A local gas station worker told the police that Jim stopped in and actually asked for directions back to California.
Okay, so what you're saying is that, there's some evidence here, evidentiary, that he's planning on going back to California.
Yeah, just one day in, which completely contradicts the whole Nashville plan. Sometime during this detour, he decides to pick up the phone.
Yeah.
We're going to look again at the actual notes that Barbara typed up regarding this phone call she got from him, because this is a pivot point for the whole case. March 5th, 3:15 p.m. California time, Jim calls Barbara. He tells her he's just calling to let her know he's all right.
Okay.
Since he'd only left Los Angeles the day before, she actually didn't have any reason to think he wouldn't be okay.
Yeah.
So that actually startled her a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little bit out of the blue. So, I mean, that's an interesting thing. Like, did he, talking about having the sense of a premonition, perhaps, did he realize that there might be some dangerous territory ahead or something might happen to him and he better check in now, like I said?
Or had something already happened?
Yeah, people weren't texting each other, so it's more of an effort to pull over and make a long-distance call with a pocket full of dimes.
Yeah.
And so she wasn't expecting it. And, usually you don't call home to say everything's fine unless something, happened that might make someone think that things were not okay or that she might hear something later. This is very curious.
Right. So apparently Barbara asked him for his driver's license number to handle some car insurance stuff and asked where he is. And he tells her he's in Santa Rosa, New Mexico. And he says, I'll probably be leaving here tomorrow. And Barbara asks, well, why are you waiting around? And Jim says to her, you wouldn't believe it if I told you.
Which that line always peeves me a bit because it's like, some people wouldn't. Yeah, just tell me. I think that's nowadays called a vague post.
Yeah.
So she asked him like, okay, Jim, what's the matter? Is anything wrong? And he just shuts the door on the conversation and tells her, hey, just forget it. Just forget I said anything. I'll call you from Nashville. And then that was it. that was the last time she ever speaks to her husband. So the days just start ticking by with no word from him or anyone else.
Right. She doesn't know where he is. By March 14th, Barbara calls the San Diego Police Department to find out how to file a missing persons report. And they told her that she had to file it in Los Angeles since that was where he was last seen.
Yeah.
A few days later, on March 17th, Jim's brother Jerry calls the Santa Rosa police to see if Jim maybe got thrown in jail.
Right.
That's when they find out about the March 5th traffic stop and the sobriety test that he passed.
So they know he made it to town and that he interacted with the cops and then he was cleared to go, but there's still no Jim.
That's right. So the real break happens on March 21st. A woman named Ann Pacheco from the New Mexico State Police calls Jerry, Jim's brother, and drops a heavy piece of information. Jim's car is sitting in a police impound lot, and it's been there since March 8th. They found the Volkswagen Bug abandoned 23 miles from the main road way out near a property called the Genetti Ranch, or Genetti. I'm not sure it's an Italian last name, Genetti. I think it's Genetti, but that's where they found it. Yes.
Right. If you lived a long time in Southern California, you're from there. When you hear just ranch and something bad, it just makes you think of Spawn Ranch. Anyway, not the good feeling here, but just like an abandoned car. It's starting to feel weird here. And also, taking a Volkswagen Beetle 23 miles out into the rough desert is perhaps not the wisest choice in the world.
Yeah, and there were actual sightings of him. Mrs. Genetti of the ranch saw a man standing by the car and stopped to ask if he needed any help, and he told her no. She then radioed her neighbor, Emil Bigelow, who then called the state police. They sent a guy named Lee Cordova out to tow the car in as abandoned because there was nobody there at that point. There's also a story from Donald Sena, S-E-N-A, whose dad, Pete, worked on a nearby ranch.
Right. Pete might have been the absolute last person that Jim spoke with. He offered him a ride in the cold desert winter, and Jim turned it down. And I want people to understand this too. In March, everybody thinks, okay, if you're not from there or have visited, you think of the desert, it's just hot all the time.
Yeah.
And that's certainly true in that corner of the United States. It gets scorchingly hot in the desert and gets actually very dangerous. We've talked about that aspect a few times on the show, but also in the wintertime, it's, high or low desert can get really cold.
At night, yes.
Yeah. And sometimes in the day, like with the wind, this skin bracingly cold. So that's a little curious though, is that he didn't want to ride. It's cold and windy out. We already know, I'm trying to do a little recap for myself here, in that he told his wife, something odd has happened. You're not going to believe it. And we don't know what that is. It's very vague, but just don't worry about it. But he did call to make contact with her because it sounds like he's a little worried.
Yeah.
And so there's a little bit of, it's just kind of something brewing here.
And Donald and his dad, Pete Sena, they thought he was just some kind of cowboy because he had a handlebar mustache, which, they're out there. These people are ranch hands and they live and work out there. Not all that surprising based on his look. But when the police actually inventoried the impounded car, all the stuff that we said he packed earlier is still in there. Sitting right there on the front seat is his ID, his driver's license, that box of his 2 albums, and his 12-string Guild guitar. Not all in the front seat, but in the car. Yeah. Al Dobbs said it best when he said Jim would never have left that guitar behind.
The idea here is that it's the one thing that, it's his moneymaker, right? It's the one thing that's going to fuel his career. It's actually worth something. Just a quick Google here. In the 1970s, I just asked, how much would a 12-string Guild guitar cost? And it says roughly in the 1970s, a new 12-string Guild guitar, such as the premium F412 or F512 models, typically cost between $500 and $900, which was a significant investment comparable to top-tier Martin or Gibson models.
Okay.
And so adjusted for inflation, it says, these instruments were considered high-end professional-grade guitars rather than entry-level models. So just figure that. He takes, a little over $100 with him on the whole trip, and the guitar is worth 5 trips. So
yeah, exactly.
It doesn't...
More than the car,
it's just right. And so, like, if he just, let me stretch my legs, I can imagine him, even if he's just going to walk away, let me take my guitar, I'll just sit down in the shade maybe and play, just get some of that energy out. It's just weird that he would leave that there or leave that together
Right.
altogether. You know what I'm saying? Just like it's worth a lot back then.
Yeah.
And so, and worth even more now. But yeah, it's just I think it's one of the major or maybe the main odd facts that
Yes.
it's like, yeah, he would not have done that.
You know, a thoughtfully built wardrobe comes down to pieces that mix well and last.
What? Oh, right. Yeah, we're talking about
Yes.
Quince. Sorry, I thought that was a really odd non sequitur for a second. But you're right. That's where Quince shines. With premium fabrics, a considered design, and everyday essentials that feel effortless to wear and dependable, even as the seasons change. And speaking of mixing well, I recently had, I guess you could say, a business meeting of sorts, but all my Quince organic cotton cashmere dress shirts were in the wash. But then I remembered I had my trusty Quince Mongolian lightweight cashmere sweater, and it fit the bill and my torso perfectly. Just dressy enough, but super soft and comfy. No undershirt required. It's cashmere, baby.
Please tell me you didn't say it's cashmere, baby, in the meeting, did you?
No, I did not. I didn't have to. You could tell instantly that I exuded complete class, style, and sophistication.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, fortunately for us mere mortals, Quince can make anyone look great with everyday quality essentials we love and that last, and know you'll love them too. Like, speaking of Mongolian cashmere, Quince has it in short sleeve polos as the weather warms up, and quality linen bottoms and shorts for when it warms up even more.
Ah, yes. Soon it'll be time for Quince's tees in 100% Pima cotton and European jersey linen. Versatile pieces that make your wardrobe work season to season, baby.
Who are you, Telly Savalas? Stop saying baby.
Come on, he was great in that Talkie Tina Twilight Zone episode. But okay, who loves you, baby?
Well, I do miss him, actually. Well, the cashmere is 100% Mongolian, as you said. The same stuff luxury brands use. The Pima cotton is long staple, which means it stays soft and doesn't pill. The European jersey linen is breathable and lightweight. Everything is built to hold up to regular wear and still look good.
And it's affordable, because Quince works directly with top factories and cuts out the middlemen. So you're not paying for brand markup or fancy brick-and-mortar retail stores. Just quality clothing.
That's right. Their clothing is rated between 4.5 and 5 stars by thousands of people wearing it every day, including me. And they only partner with factories that meet rigorous standards for craftsmanship and ethical production.
So stop overcomplicating your wardrobe. You don't need a closet full of options. You need a few pieces that actually work. Right now, go to quince.com/AL for free shipping and 365-day returns. That's a full year to build your wardrobe and love it. And you will.
Now available in Canada, too. Don't keep settling for clothes that don't last. Go to quince.com/AL for free shipping and 365-day returns.
Quince.com/AL. So I've started shopping for a life insurance policy for my mom, and it's so much easier to do a select quote, at least compared to the old days, which is where I would get out a big old notebook and then spend hours perusing a bunch of websites and making comparison notes.
Oh, yeah, been there, done that. And you're right. Select Quote makes finding the right policy for you or your loved ones so much easier. And you get so much more peace of mind knowing you selected something that's going to work for your budget and a company that's trustworthy.
Exactly. You're right about that. That's a huge part of it, because I know folks are mostly concerned about price, like I am. But price doesn't matter if the company doesn't want to pay out if something happens.
Facts. Life insurance is something you want to get right, and right away, because you know what they say. It's never cheaper today than it is tomorrow. So you want to get the right coverage at the right price and with a company you trust. And if you do it early enough, you can get coverage for about the cost of one of your streaming services, thanks to Select Quote.
Look, if you're new to life insurance, you're not alone. Thankfully, we found Select Quote. For over 40 years, Select Quote has helped more than 2 million Americans understand their options and get the coverage they need. Over $700 billion in coverage and counting.
As a broker, their mission is simple: to find you the right insurance policy at the best price.
Select Quote takes the guesswork out of finding the right life insurance policy. You don't have to sort through dozens of confusing options on your own like I used to do. Instead, one of their licensed agents will find the right policy at the right price for you, comparing plans from trusted, top-rated insurance companies to find a policy that fits your health, your lifestyle, and your budget. And they work for you for free.
And you're not out of luck if you have pre-existing health conditions, because SelectQuote partners with companies that offer policies for people with conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes, or heart disease. SelectQuote makes life insurance simple, even if this is your first time thinking about it. Head to selectquote.com/AL, and a licensed insurance agent will call you right away with the right policy for your life and your budget. And you'll be covered faster than you think. SelectQuote works with providers who offer same-day coverage up to $2 million worth with no medical exam required.
Well, that saying is true. Life insurance is never cheaper than it is today. Get the right life insurance for you for less and save more than 50% at selectquote.com/AL.
Save more than 50% on term life insurance at selectquote.com/AL today to get started.
That's selectquote.com/AL. SelectQuote. They shop, you save.
Hi, I'm Emma. And I'm Ella. And when our daddy is commuting home from work to play with us, he's listening to Astonishing Legends. Now let's get back to his show.
Getting back to the police, they checked the La Mesa Hotel, and yes, his bed had never been slept in. And during this search period, there was a false alarm that, must have terrified the family. A New Mexico paper actually printed a story that an unidentified, badly decomposed body had been found buried about 8 miles west of Las Cruces.
That's about 260 miles away.
Right, so that distance, it complicates the logistics here, because a man on foot facing freezing desert temperatures doesn't cover 260 miles without a vehicle or some willing driver, hitchhiking.
Right. And we also already know that he had turned down multiple rides near the Genetti Ranch.
Right.
He told locals he didn't need help. If he made it to Las Cruces, then he had to have accepted a ride from someone later on.
Yeah.
Or somebody would have had to take him there against his will.
Right.
But this body was a Caucasian male, roughly 6'2", 180 pounds, with a mustache and a small beard.
Right, which is an exact physical match for Jim, right?
Yeah, pretty much, down to the height and the facial hair, kind of. The Santa Rosa City Police Department, under Chief Joe Eddie Martinez, sent all of Jim's physical data over to the medical examiner's office in Albuquerque to see if it would be a match.
Right.
Ultimately, it turned out to be someone else entirely. At least that's what the record says now.
Yeah.
So the local police and Jim's brothers kept searching. Retired newspaper reporter Davey Delgado, who we mentioned earlier, said they left, quote, no arroyo unturned, end quote. But they found zero trace of him. He had just vanished.
Yeah. So just imagine, no body, no clothes, no signs of a struggle.
Right. We have a 35-year-old man. He wasn't very old either. Missing in the desert, car full of physical evidence that raises more questions than it answers.
Right. But to truly understand why this case fascinates so many people, us included, we have to pivot away from the desert and step into the psychological part of this for Jim. What was his mindset? What was going on there?
Yeah.
So that has us backing up to his first album that Dobbs produced but couldn't really distribute, called U.F.O.
Yeah, the writer John Dale perfectly described the U.F.O. album as a disappearing act and a magic trick. Dale is, for folks who don't recognize the name, a respected music journalist and a critic who's written for publications like Uncut and The Wire. He specializes in obscure, avant-garde, and forgotten artists. And a few years ago, he wrote a comprehensive deep dive into this exact case called The Vanishing of Jim Sullivan.
Yes. Dale is the writer who crystallizes the psychological weight of this U.F.O. album. He points out how it's filled with themes of illusions, ghosts, characters searching for answers by looking up at the sky. So let's start with the title track here, U.F.O., which begins with these celestial sounding strings, you could say. And the song is essentially about watching dancing lights in the sky. And Jim sings about checking out the show with a glassy eye, just staring up and wondering what's out there.
Yeah, and it's set to this warm, like psychedelic country folk sound, so it doesn't sound terrifying. It almost sounds kind of comforting. Jeff Terrett from Treble Zine pointed out that the song isn't entirely straight-faced, but it's not a joke either. There's a genuine sense of wonder in it. And what makes that specific song so haunting is the geography of where Jim disappeared. He goes missing in New Mexico, the exact same state where Roswell happened. Perhaps you've heard of it. So you have this guy singing about UFOs who vanishes right into the epicenter of American UFO lore.
Coinky dink, I don't know. Just made me think of another thing. I told you about this, you'd probably forgotten. When I was house sitting for you, you had I think the furnace guy come over, or the HVAC guy, young guy, Hispanic heritage, got along really well because he was asking, like, what are you doing here with the microphone? I was, oh, well, my partner, they're on vacation right now. And I noticed, I think he had a tiger's eye bracelet on. It's like, oh, you into that's interesting. You into metaphysical stuff? It's, oh, yeah. My girlfriend makes me wear this. So he asked, well, what do you do? And I said, no, my partner and I, we have a podcast about paranormal stuff, strange history, things like that. And he got really excited. He goes, oh, man, I wish you could talk to my father, I think also his grandfather, because where he was in this area here, in this region, he said, like, oh, just dancing lights on the horizon. It was just a known thing.
Right.
Yeah, we would see them so often, and my grandfather just would point them out. And I think he said, like, don't go to them. But he said, respect them, notice them, because it's a real thing. He's like, yeah, what is that? He's like, that's not planes or anything. Like, those are bobbing. It's kind of like a light phenomenon, like Marfa, Texas, or the Brown Mountain Lights. This is something weird on the horizon that I think his grandfather thought was like, yeah, those are others. Yeah. Anyway, interesting little aside, but just reminded me of this whole area here, kind of deserty location here. So, but back in that era, speaking of music, as we do, and how knowledgeable we are, the idea was that when you created an album, there was often themes. So I don't know about you, Scott, like we were talking about AM radios earlier with, pop rock hits and stuff. And at night, sometimes I would lay in bed with the single earpiece, the mono earpiece that was beige, plugged into the radio. And at night is when the FM stations would have their like album rock. Yeah. With the quiet talking DJs. And they would play whole AOR sides of
stations, album-oriented rock.
That's right. Yeah. And they would play whole albums because they were created musically, composed, designed
to work together,
orchestrated, as a whole thing. And I never really got that. It's like, oh, that was fun. It's like they'll play the whole side of a Led Zeppelin album,
right?
Because it was meant to flow, and the songs were composed and put on the album in a certain arrangement and order, more tell a story or theme of the album. And where it really sunk in for me that was the case, that there was some thinking about this, is listen to Pink Floyd's Animals album.
Right.
The whole thing just flows. It's meant to be that way, not just single tracks. So anyway, that's what we're talking about in thinking about all the tracks on this album and what it could mean as an entire story told in separate songs that are on it. Yes. And, there's a song on Jim's album called Highways that serves as, I guess, the emotional centerpiece of this record. In it, Jim is basically singing about finding a sense of home, but not in a physical place, more so in a state of motion. And he sings, quote, "It's easier to stay here, think I know my way here," end quote. It explores that fantasy of escape, being out on the open road, the rush of being invisible and just slipping away from the world. John Dale, the critic, noted that the song sounds exactly like Jim Sullivan making a promise to disappear one day.
That's one of the more accessible songs on the album. It's a proper earworm, but although a lot of the songs on there are, but there's some lyrics about mortality in the album too. There's a song called So Natural, written about the grief of him losing his brother. His brother had been an insurance salesman who died of a heart attack on his way home from work one day. In that song, Jim takes on the role of a watcher at his brother's funeral, commenting on how natural his brother looks in death. Then in a later verse, Jim turns the focus on himself. He basically wishes for oblivion. He wishes for nobody to be at his eventual funeral and for his ashes to be scattered in the wind.
More prophecy, perhaps, but just a vibe there of, well, he achieved his goal. I think he's somewhere in oblivion. But his deep spirituality and fascination with the space between life and death, it kind of permeates the entire album. And on the track Whistle Stop, he sings about the thunder and lightning in his eyes, describing an interaction with a woman he believes he knew from a past life. So again, you got to keep in mind, there's a heavy metaphysical vibe going on around the world, but especially in the southern, western, southwestern United States here, LA included. And with this track, Whistle Stop, it sets up kind of a foggy, dreamlike world that Jim's talking about here. Jim and his wife, Barbara, were actually very interested in New Age mysticism, like we were saying, so many folks were during this time. And you see that heavily in the song Jerome. Jerome is a real ghost town in Arizona. It boomed with copper mining in the late 1800s and went bust by the early 1950s, which is so common to a lot of these stories here. But in the early 1970s, it revitalized itself because it's close to Sedona, which a lot of people know is famous for its vortexes and high spiritual energy, which we actually just talked about on our last Junk Drawer episode on Patreon a few days ago.
Sedona is calling us, man. I love Sedona. It's just such a beautiful place. If you ever get a chance to go there, I highly recommend it. But here, Jim is using the real world desert ghost town of Jerome as a metaphor, seemingly. He's searching for a place that's difficult to find, a place you can only see if you're driving slow.
Yeah, I mean, he's writing about a journey, and Barbara actually leaned into these beliefs after he vanished. Jim's son, Chris, mentioned that because his parents believed in reincarnation and astrology, and Barbara took solace in the idea that he might have been abducted by aliens because he's still alive somewhere, right? And he might come back.
Yeah.
As Chris put it, she was convinced Jim was up in the stars somewhere, just waiting for her.
It's a comforting thought when you have absolutely zero physical closure.
Right.
But it all comes back to how Jim positioned himself on that record. Even the album cover itself is pretty strange.
It really is. The cover art of U.F.O features 5 duplications of Jim's face, and they're all looking up curiously at something that's just out of sight off the actual album itself. Cover. John Dale analyzed this too, pointing out that throughout the album, Jim's characters are always observers. They are searching for answers by watching carefully. In the song Johnny, a crowd watches a boy flying in the sky, wondering if he's discovered anything from being up there.
Which makes his disappearance out near the Genetti Ranch so poetic in a very dark way, actually, if you think about it. Al Dobbs actually said, it's poetic to picture Jim still walking out there somewhere in the desert. And that's one of the photos that you see of him, which I think is in the album, which I don't have in front of me right now, where it's just him standing out in the desert.
Yeah.
It's a black and white grainy photo, and it's so grainy that it almost looks like he's walking on water, which I thought was pretty spooky.
Yeah.
You know, and he's got like a poncho. It's very, very
With
cool.
that Fata Morgana effect, you think?
Yeah, it's got that kind of vibe. But Dobbs also admitted he thinks Jim stumbled into something or someone that was unforgiving. That's his thought there.
Right. You know, the other thing you got to keep in mind is that maybe this is more terrestrial and ugly in a human sense.
Yeah.
And that he met some folks out there because there were a lot of weirdos. Did I not mention that earlier? They were coming to these areas because, again, when you have a lot of, I think, accepting, open people that are into new experiences, you get a lot of predators that come with it. And so, it just wasn't as known back then. But I remember, you were a kid. It's like, I think the generations before that, hitchhiking was not considered safe, certainly ever, but more acceptable in a way. You heard more people try to get around by that. And then, as I was growing up, it's like, you know what? We're learning that this is really not that safe.
Right, exactly.
I don't know if it's a dark turn in the zeitgeist, something's happening, but there's just a lot more trouble with wandering around, being free and open. And even though Jim's a big guy, you just never know, okay?
Yeah.
So it could be something, like I said, maybe not something in the stars, but just something here that's just awful and evil and human and mundane in a way. But for decades, after that car was towed out of the desert, Jim's story basically faded away. But then his music came back from the dead.
Yeah, about 16 years ago, a guy named Matt Sullivan, who, just to be clear, no relation to Jim, was running an archival record label called Light in the Attic, which is where I got my copy of U.F.O from, and I guess the only place you can purchase it. They have some amazing music. You can find them at Light in the Attic, all together, no spaces, .net.
Yeah.
But Matt happened to hear the U.F.O album on a music blog back then called Waxidermy.
That's clever.
And he was completely transfixed. He later said that within the first 30 seconds of listening to the track Jerome, he knew he had to put this record out. He had to resurrect it. He loved the Americana sound it had, and he was blown away by the instrumentation and the way it was produced, because I'm sure it's like, oh, this is the Wrecking Crew. This sounds amazing. But also the lyrics are good and the singer is good. It's like, what is this?
Yeah, it's enough to spark some interest here. And frankly, it's a miracle the physical media, we're talking about the tracks themselves, even survived long enough to be digitized.
Yeah.
Because here you've got an album that barely sold any copies in 1969. And it's just waiting for the right person to rediscover it 40 years later. But in the 2010 reissue of the U.F.O album, Light in the Attic didn't just press the music. They packaged it with an extensive multi-page booklet of liner notes, which is, again, such a cool thing that folks, if you haven't discovered
thing
LPs,
about vinyl.
No, like I said, it's like reading the cereal box as you're eating your bowl of, pick your kid's breakfast cereal. It's something that goes along with it. Yeah, it's just reading the back.
I blurted that out, so I don't know what happened.
Yeah, you just read it. But you sat there, like, would you just stare into space? Well, some do. It's informing the music, these liner notes that you get with an album. And it's physical. It's part of the whole experience, which is why people rediscovered vinyl. Like, hey, this is cool. Like, yeah, we already knew that, but glad you discovered it. It's just the thoughts and the ideas behind the album, whatever the artist wanted to put there. It just adds so much more. It's like watching the bonus material with DVDs for your favorite show. Like we were just talking to, I was telling you about all the great stuff that's on the Breaking Bad bonus DVDs. You get so much. If you like something that's a creation of media, you get so much more info from it. And so
physical copies, things you can keep that won't disappear when your hard drive dies, or some remote company decides that you no longer own the thing you paid for.
Right.
And they just disappear it off the servers.
Yeah, and now they're rare and very expensive. Right. And so it's exactly. And also the fact that, like, no, you don't own anything these days. You just have to rent it and you'll be fine with that. Right. And
the thing that pisses me off is renting the thing that I already bought. That's like, why am I having to rent this again?
Yeah. I think that's all part of the big plan. They make you buy it twice and then you get less. That's all.
And keep paying for it.
That's right. Keep the money trickling in. Well, here in this album, the booklet that came with the album is the best reconstructed timeline for what few details we have today about Jim's disappearance, because it contains all their direct interviews with Jim's family, his session musicians, and the original producer.
Right. So Matt at Light in the Attic Records starts reading the comments on that Waxidermy blog post. He goes right down the rabbit hole of Jim's disappearance. He didn't want to just repress it. He wanted to figure out what happened. Right. So he teams up with his wife, a filmmaker named Jennifer Maas, Maas, along with a music writer, a relatively well-known one named Andrea Lyle, Lisle, and a literal private detective. So they go to all this work. They spent years tracking down the major and minor players from Jim's life. Not for nothing, this is exactly the kind of side quest that I love to do. Personally, that's how I managed to not get bored with Astonishing Legends. Like these people are after my own heart on this. It's like this. I would have done this exact same thing. Oh yeah. And I even now, Forrest, I wanted to tell you earlier today as we were like getting ready to record. I was like, I want to go to this little town where he disappeared. I think it'd be really cool. And it makes me mad that I didn't think about it on all my. I've driven through New Mexico 1,000 times. I could have easily gone by this place, and I didn't do it.
Well, that's kind of a big, interesting point you bring up, because I think that way too. I don't know if you're the same, but when I take these long trips, especially by myself, it's different when you have people in the car. But I love the solitude of it and alone with your thoughts. And I'll see, I think, presumably, like out in the desert, not completely flat open desert, but like hilly, deserty-like terrain with hills, and you'll see a fire road, I'm presuming, or an access road. It just goes off, splits the hills, and goes off into oblivion. Right. Speaking of which, like, I wish I had time to like just pull off and just see where that leads, and probably just leads to a shed with some electric company materials in there, or generator, and that's it, because it's an
or an angry man in an old pickup with a shotgun.
I've come across that too. Weirdly, nothing too dangerous, but I remember, shooting student films out there, and and we just heard gunshots. Like, I don't know if that's directed towards us, but let's change the location.
Yeah, let's head out. Yeah,
because again, we don't know what kind of mystery is here yet. We've got a lot of tantalizing clues, but it could be just something as simple as that. And unfortunately, there's a lot of weird territorial people. Just way back when we were talking about the Lost Dutchman mine, and people wandering around those Superstition Mountains and meeting with someone nefarious, or just want you to get out of there. So, but I'm totally down with that. But my point being is that rarely when you're, especially when you're on a road trip and you have a destination you're supposed to get to in a certain amount of time, you don't have time to pull off and wander around like that.
So in 2010, Matt and Jennifer flew out to New Mexico and drove down to Santa Rosa to physically chase down old leads and retrace Jim's last known whereabouts. They dug into the local police files. They actually found the report that we mentioned earlier where a gas station worker told the cops Jim stopped in and asked for directions back to California.
Yeah, that's another tantalizing clue, as I said. Just like, okay, what made him want to turn back after his you're seeking out his dreams? So yeah, I'm totally down. Like, you have a mystery laid at your feet if you're these folks here with a professional investigator.
That's
but
right.
Talking about this asking for directions thing, what conflicts with that idea that he's hell bent on getting to Nashville and suddenly now, like I said, what's the big turnaround? What happened there that he told his wife she wouldn't believe if he told her? Don't worry about it, but it seems like he's maybe a little bit worried. Yeah. And so why would he be asking now how to get back to Los Angeles when he's essentially only one long day of driving into his trip?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It goes against his plan. So the Light in the Attic crew and Lyle, they also looked into the idea of suicide, but none of Jim's friends viewed him as suicidal despite his career hardships. They then tried to figure out why he would refuse Pete Cena's offer of a ride on that night in the cold desert, but nobody had an answer for that either. Matt said it was an incredibly emotional trip, tracing Jim's last steps, meeting his family, but he was ultimately just grateful the albums were made. Yeah. Now, here's the most bittersweet thing about that 2010 reissue of the album. This is the one I have. Yeah. It vastly outperformed all of the record sales Jim had during his actual lifetime combined.
Like I've been telling you for years, if we really wanted Astonishing Legends to explode, we've got to vanish, especially into a portal. But look, how many times that happened to an artist?
You keep saying that. You say that's how you're going to step back at some point.
Well, maybe you can. I don't know. And maybe it's a trip to Sedona when, I'm at that age where it's just like, rather than just being in some care facility, like, I'll just take a wander out in the desert, see what happens. Yeah. Because maybe there's better healthcare on the other side. I don't know. But the idea, we can revive you. Yeah, we've cured this, here in the underside, in the upside down world. Yeah, we cured that decades ago. The idea, though, is that it's such a common story as well, albeit all the details are strange. Like, yeah, it's like how many famous artists do you know? Like, they didn't really make it until they passed away.
Right.
Or gave up or something happened because it's that lag in appreciation. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me. It's like he's discovered because of a lot of factors is that you just have better distribution now of music, even in the 2010s. It's like more people are knowing about this. And so it's got to find your audience here. But yeah, it's just another odd fact and a bit tragic and bittersweet, as you say.
You have talked so much about eventually disappearing on the show that I think people are just going to be like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
They're not going to believe it.
No, I'll come back and it's like, yeah, you just took an unscheduled hiatus. But, that's the idea. All seriousness is that in some ways I can understand the appeal of that, of like, but here again, trying to figure out Jim's mindset, and of course, complete speculation on our end, not knowing the guy. And even then, when you know somebody really well, how often do you hear that? Like, oh, they would have never have done that. And then on a rare occasion you find out like, no, they did. You just didn't understand what was going on in their head and they weren't real forthcoming with that. But it didn't make any sense. That's all you got to go by. So I guess I'm saying I can understand. It's also a romantic notion too of leaving behind a mystery. But here also what's countering that as we're talking about it is that he didn't seem to have totally thrown in the towel. Or, he's had some setbacks, but a lot of musicians that push through too, especially ones of talent, deep down, I feel that they know they have the talent. And if they just keep at it, what was it? Like Dolly Parton got rejected 17 times or something for her music recording. And she didn't care. She just kept, no, I want to do this. Kept pressing with it and became a legend. And here it's like, I think something happened to put a hiccup in his plans, but he didn't seem like, okay, that's it. I drove for a day. Now I'm just going to head back.
Yeah, that doesn't fit the description or what we know of him. And I would say it's kind of sad, honestly, that U.F.O, the album, never got its footing back in the day. I mean, it's one of my favorite albums that I have. I listen to it, like I said, regularly. But it's definitely true that the mystery of his disappearance added to the cachet of it. That combined with it being so well produced.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is that it wasn't just a gimmicky album. It actually had some talent behind it. That was the magic formula that finally gave the album sales legs, you could say, is that combination of a little bit of mystery, and good production value, musicianship. And by the way, that short documentary that Jennifer Moss made with Matt Sullivan about their investigation is linked in our show notes. We'll be sure to put that in there. It's only about 6 minutes long, but Jim's son Chris and his widow Barbara are in it. And there's some amazing shots of the desert where his car was found and the La Mesa Hotel that he checked into but never slept in.
You know, somewhere between that first warm weekend and realizing short season is getting dangerously close, eating well stops feeling optional.
Right. I'm just glad you're not one of those guys who wears shorts in the dead of winter. Right? No, we're absolutely pulling these intense late night recording sessions, folks. It's just so easy when that happens to grab whatever fast food is closest because the fatigue sets in.
Right, which it was usually a terrible idea. But Factor is how I stopped letting a busy schedule be my excuse. They deliver fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs. I had the tangy southern chicken after a long day of research last week, and it was the perfect reward. Ready in 2 minutes, no planning, no cooking.
Yeah, you really can't go wrong with Factor. I mean, it's real food. You're getting quality, functional ingredients, including lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole food ingredients, and healthy fats. Plus, no refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners, no refined seed oils.
Which means no sugar crashes after you eat.
That's right. And honestly, the variety is incredible. They have like 100 rotating weekly meals to keep things fresh and delicious through winter. You never get bored.
Exactly. The meals fit your goals and schedule, whether you want healthier eating, calorie management, or just more protein. Options include high protein, calorie smart, Mediterranean diet, GLP-1 support, and ready-to-eat salads.
And they even have the new Muscle Pro collection, which supports strength and recovery if you're getting back into a workout routine, which I know you've been doing lately, sir.
Yes, I have. Factor supports that perfectly. It's always fresh, never frozen, and again, ready in about 2 minutes.
Yep, just no prep, no stress, so you can actually stick to your goals.
Head to factormeals.com/AL50OFF, that's 50, and use code AL50OFF to get 50% off and free breakfast for a year.
That's factormeals.com/AL50OFF and use code AL50OFF to get 50% off.
Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase.
Make healthier eating easy with Factor.
Hey everyone, this is Jay Perry, and you are listening to Astonishing Legends. Let's get back to the show.
Circling back to the U.F.O. re-release, critics and other musicians were also impressed with it. It was universally well received in 2010. But, you know, Forrest, I feel like there was a lot of rediscovery of these lost artists that didn't quite make it at that time.
Right.
And I was saying that thinking about, because this is what this reminded me of, was that Volkswagen commercial.
I was about to say.
Yeah, that Jonathan Dayton and Valerie Ferris directed, which used the song Pink Moon by Nick Drake.
Yes, I was just thinking about that. That commercial was a sensation in every form. It's just, but you hear, again, a lot about this rediscovery. And in this case, there's such a feel to that music.
Yeah.
Nick Drake. And I'm sure everybody here, even if you don't remember that commercial, when I was an editor, we would call that an emo piece.
Yeah.
Because it's just really meant to evoke, and I worked on a lot of car videos with that. And what the manufacturer will do is like, we don't need to hit you with a bunch of sales points or some narrator or this and that. We need you to feel what it's like to experience this car. And a lot of them, Volkswagen did that a lot. Also Porsche, which I worked a lot of emo pieces where it wasn't a heavy-handed sales pitch. It was just like, this is how much fun it's going to be and how your kids are going to love it and this and that. It's a feeling that you get with this kind of freedom. But that song, you'll get the idea when you see the commercial because it was all just kind of dreamy, same kind of thing here, just dreamy starlit nights. I think the idea, the gag of the commercial was that they're driving to this party, maybe a coastal California highway, maybe Highway 1 or something. If you've ever driven it, you feel that exactly. So they nailed it. And then they're just enjoying the drive with the top down and the stars overhead. And they get to this party and there's like some drunk dude, some broheim with a couple of beers, like, woo. And they're like, no, we're not in that mood anymore.
We're having more fun in the car.
Yeah, we're going to, they just keep on driving. So that's the idea. Conversely, I don't like the idea though, that after that so much of commercial ad music has lyrics in it now. Like that started a trend.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, that's enough. I don't need to hear the newest pop hit behind every
Yeah.
commercial now. So, but anyway, getting back, that was a good example, let's say, of another artist that was, he was immensely talented, but sold less than 10,000 albums while he was alive.
Yeah.
And it just also reminds me, I think Jeff Buckley also had a similar story. He's probably more popular back during the time, but also a weird, tragic story with him. And just a rediscovery, though, like people are like, this is really good. And so then he has a cult following. So, talking about Nick Drake, and then, sadly, he overdosed at 26 in 1974. So he had a cult following in the indie music community. But when that ad came out, his posthumous career exploded. Not good that does him now, but I'm glad the music, same scenario. I'm glad the music's out there and people have rediscovered the talent.
I think kind of to the point you were saying, from a mass communications theory, which I think you and I both studied at least a little bit in college, that sort of thing was teaching pop culture at that time that there was a lot of talent out there that had come and gone without ever hitting it big. And in some cases, with the digital revolution and the internet maturing, which it was still doing back at this, in 1999 with Nick Drake anyway, supporters of those artists were able to finally get their work easily published all over the world, not just from TV commercials, but online with, at the time, blogs and forums. So all these people are like, wait, how have I never heard this? And that's kind of what happened.
And I think to this point that's what, talking about Jim's, I guess the vibe he's going for is what we're talking about here that's been rediscovered, and that it's also not just music, it's a feeling, which only music can do or does really well. And wherever Jim's head was at the time, it's partly or mostly connected to his experience here, as weird as it may be, in that the music captures that. And so that's, I think, when something clicks, that's what people get. It's like, oh, I know exactly how this feels.
Yeah.
Even with visuals now, like just even from a TV commercial that's done well, you get that feeling coming through. And, people then start looking for artists like that, which is great. And that's one of the ups and downs of everything. That's one of the benefits, is that we have access to discovery. I mean, how are we even hearing this now? Like back in our day,
Right.
I remember the day when you watched something on TV and that was it, the one time, and that was over.
Yeah.
You went on to something else. You went outside. And then, so the idea is that it's much more, in a way, ephemeral, but I'm glad these things are back because they're still enjoyable. It's still great works of art. And it's a little too late for Nick Drake and Jim Sullivan and folks of that ilk. But in some cases, it's financially benefited their families, which is also great. Their legacy goes on from their hard work here. And what's interesting about Nick's family is that his mom, Molly, was a musician and poet too, and had her own work and also had her own resurgence.
Yes.
All very tragic, but at the same time, it is kind of heartwarming here.
Jim's family made money as well from that resurgence.
Yeah, right.
And Nick Drake was an amazing musician. I would say check all his stuff out too. Not to get on a tangent, but Jonathan Dayton and Valerie Ferris, married couple at the time at least. I don't know what they're up to now, but they directed that Volkswagen commercial. They directed a lot of other stuff that I wound up working on as an assistant editor. They're amazingly talented.
Yeah.
I just have to point out another tangent. One of my favorite music videos of all time, Tonight Tonight by the Smashing Pumpkins, which is an homage to one of my personal favorite filmmakers, Georges Méliès, and his 1902 French silent science fiction movie, Trip to the Moon, or La Voyage dans la Lune, which is,
Oddly, you could see a lot of Billy Corgan and his interesting podcast here. Mostly like clips and stuff, but he's got a lot of interesting things to say, a lot of them paranormal based.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, anyway. Well, yes, an amazing movie, and in the top 100 or 200 greatest films of all time, I think, on more than just a few lists. And let's see your tattoo. Show everyone your tattoo.
Well, everyone. It's just you. We're not on camera right
now.
That's
right.
But yes, I do have, my left arm is covered in a Trip to the Moon tattoo.
Folks, that'll be I don't know if it's OnlyFans or where you're on the platform where you
it's
for $10.
It's going to be more like OnlyFan.
OnlyFan.
It's going to be like,
and not
it's just
me.
Going to be my cat.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's like, oh, let me see it. Anyway, folks. We're getting off track here. If you want to take a little journey with that tangent, look up Trip to the Moon by Georges Méliès. That's Melies, Georges Méliès, French. And then watch the Tonight Tonight video for the Smashing Pumpkins. So how did I get on this? Because Tonight Tonight was directed by Dayton Ferris.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. So it all comes back together.
Volkswagen.
Anyway,
that I was slow. Sorry, I was slow on the pickup there. But also a Volkswagen Connection and Pink Moon.
Yes.
And also, Nick had a beautiful ethereal voice. He's singing haunting songs about depression and mortality. and when you reintroduce a record about aliens and disappearing, and you tie it to a real world mystery that's unsolved in the New Mexico desert, I think you're going to attract a very specific kind of attention and listener.
When the U.F.O album came back out in 2010, one of their most successful pieces of promotion was getting it featured on Coast to Coast, which, as you can imagine, the call-in theories on that broadcast just ran totally wild. People were pitching everything from government cover-ups to literal extraterrestrial abduction, which leads us directly into what we need to do next. Let's talk a little bit about some theories here.
Okay, well, we've laid out the facts. We told you about what Jim is like and his music. We've laid out the timeline, some of the physical evidence, and then, touched on some of those lyrical prophecies. And now I think we have to try to wrap our heads around what actually happened out there. So here's a question for you as we start to formulate theories and wild speculations and possible conclusions. Yeah. How does a 6'2" musician completely evaporate from the New Mexico desert without leaving a single physical trace of evidence behind? Because to this day, there's not one scrap that's ever been found.
Nothing. No belt buckle, no, unless he went out naked. There's stuff that was not biodegradable that should have turned up sooner or later. And you would think on a ranch, a working ranch, by the way, 50 years. I mean, I don't know if it's still working. It could be abandoned at this point, but you would think somebody that works on the ranch might have been like going out trying to round up cattle or whatever they were ranching. It's like would have maybe found something eventually, right?
Yes, but also, I mean, I not so much anymore. I used to watch a lot of true crime the shows because they come with the Samsung TV Plus. There's tons of them, and then they each have different scenarios. But you and I know, I think from watching 48 Hours or Daylight with your wife, is that so many different weird scenarios happen where it's like, even the Great Mull Air Mystery. Remember the guy falls out of the plane? We covered that, and just a weird set of circumstances. How did he fall out of the airplane, and why did he end up in that spot? And why did nobody find him in a very well-traveled, it's remote, but it's farmland. Why it's such a well-traveled area that was thoroughly searched, yet he ends up in a weird, precarious predicament there. His body is found in a place that it's like, we're pretty sure we searched this multiple times, and suddenly he just pops up there. Yeah. So, weird stuff happens. That's my point. But like in the more mundane cases, when you watch these crime shows, it's like, especially with them trying to find remains, weird stuff happens. There's only certain bones. Animals carry them off. But usually animals only carry them to a certain distance. We found that out with the missing 411, where it's just like, okay, animals don't usually carry a bone miles. They carry it off to get so there's no competition from other predators.
That's right. I was just talking to my wife about this today. We went to lunch and we were talking about this case, and she said, "Well, I've seen don't the scavengers take them?" It's like, no, it was the missing 411 when I actually bought that book.
Yeah.
It was like a white paper report that I had to put in a 3-ring binder, but it was a study on how animals and scavengers scatter bones.
Right.
And the interesting thing about that was nothing goes very far. It was like 20 yards in most cases.
Yeah.
The animals that are coming along, they're not hauling a leg like 3 miles away, So it's like things the things that were in that study, which they had done with actual cadavers, the parts that had gotten the furthest away were taken by raptors or birds of prey. But even those, they're not going a long way either. They're just trying to get just barely far enough away to safely eat it because there was something else near the dead body, right? So I'm going to go over here so I can chomp on this thing. But they weren't going miles and miles. So the idea that like a person's body is just going to be scattered into like tiny bits miles away from wherever they died, it's not true.
Right. No, people point that out. It's like, oh, well, scavengers took them, and then, you're just never going to find because they went in all directions. Like, yeah, to a degree. And so when you find someone's skull miles from the rest of them, there's another thing in play there rather than just wild animals. And it's a natural habit, like at one of the old apartments, there was a neighbor's kitty who was very fond of me. And so I would entertain her, and then I would give her like a piece of like chicken. And it's funny, like, very friendly, but she would take it like 6 feet away. and
Right.
then eat it. It's like, I'm not going to
Yeah.
ask for it back. You're safe, Katie.
Right,
Like,
right.
I don't,
Yeah.
it's yours now. I don't want it back. But just like, you need to get hungry again. I'm just going to eat this over here. And then she would like
Yeah,
stare
exactly.
at me.
Got to be safe. Got to make sure you're going to be able to get those calories. You know?
Right. Exactly. Well, yeah. So it's a natural thing. But like what we're talking about here is that if he did just, let's say, had an embolism, heart attack, and he just dropped dead somewhere after a hike or whatever,
Yeah.
you would find
Yeah.
something there. Maybe
Exactly.
not all of it, but something would be there. So that's
Yeah.
what we're saying. And then it's just very unlikely, very unusual that nothing was there. But getting back to your town here, Santa Rosa, which come on, man, that's a road trip we got to take one day.
Right. I know. I want to go there, but I want to back up a little bit about
Yeah.
this because a lot of times with legends like these, the granular details, they get kind of homogenized. And
Right.
what you and I like to do is get into the specifics because that's where the best clues lie.
Yeah.
Most of the time you hear that he vanished in Santa Rosa, and that is where the
Yeah,
hotel was,
right.
but his car was actually found south
Ah.
of Santa Rosa in a little town called Puerto de Luna.
Yes, the port or gateway or door of the moon.
Yeah, so everything's connected. So how did Puerto de Luna get its name?
Right. Well, the local folklore says that Coronado named it back in the 1500s. They think around 1541 after he saw the moon rise through a narrow gap in the mountains there.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Oh, and yes, I had that old book. We pulled one story about is it Frank J. Dobie. He was a great folklorist and a historian guy about lost treasures. I want to cover one of those again, but there's a book called Coronado's Children about all the weird lost mines and strange stuff. And you think it's pretty straightforward, just lost treasures, right? But like there's a lot of weird paranormal things that are interwoven with those stories. So it's a very mystical whole region here. But talking about Coronado, we know that he marched through the area around that time, 1540s here, even though it's hard to know exactly where. He was pushing east from the Rio Grande, searching for the fabled city of Quivira, Quivira, which was thought at the time to be in what we now know as Arkansas City. So
Yes,
his
in
whole
Kansas.
army there, his whole army traveled down the Pecos River Valley. They brought thousands of livestock with them, so they just couldn't wade across the river. They had to halt the expedition and build a timber bridge across the Pecos.
That's amazing. Like they stopped and built a bridge. I love that. It's like,
Well, that's
but
what you
they got to do. We got too many cows.
That's right. That's what you do when you have an army. You have also engineers, and even in World War II, it makes me think of a bridge too far, where you can't just wade across, but you have the manpower and the resources to do that. It's amazing for all the negative things. It's amazing what the Spanish did do. Wearing those metal hats out in the middle of the desert just blows my mind. But in this case, it is pretty amazing how far they got, and historians debate the precise location of that exact crossing, but the main consensus places it in the immediate vicinity of Santa Rosa and Puerto de Luna, where Jim's car was found, and where, as of 2020, only about 150 people lived. It never really got a lot bigger because when the railroad came through, it shifted the population of Santa Rosa. We were just talking about that. When routes of travel change, as they did with Route 66 being cut off in certain areas and a new highway, Highway 40, being put in, things get pocketed and sidelined, and they either can hopefully still thrive, but a lot of times they just die out. And a Coronado thought Quivira was going to be a city of gold, of course, like a Dorado. But when he got there, it was just grass huts. So
well, there you go.
Kind of a buzzkill.
Which actually, really historically, is kind of more interesting. So it was a big successful community with grass huts everywhere, people, like a thriving civilization.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's kind of like the outskirts of Tiwanaku, right? Out on the plain there, just grass huts where workers, well, now they live there because it's free and cheap. It's like BLM land. So, but I want to know what's the legend? How did that start? Why did he made this giant push out there? There's a mystical draw, was what I'm going to say. Maybe Jim experienced that same thing. There's a kind of a metaphysical, spiritual draw to that area. It's anyone that talks about it. It's not just Sedona and the portals and the turquoise jewelry and the wood carved coyotes you buy at the roadsides. There's something that draws people there. But also it's mystical and it's all good and peace and love, but also there's the dark that goes with it.
Well, here's another super fascinating tidbit about this tiny little town of Puerto de Luna. There was a Polish merchant living there who
Oh.
had a small store. His name was, and forgive me, this has got a lot of consonants in it. His name was Alexander Guzelichowski, and he had been a U.S. Army chaplain serving in 1851, which predates obviously this mystery, but there's a reason we're on this tangent. It's kind of fascinating to me anyway. So serving in 1851 with the Archbishop of Santa Fe, Bishop Lamy, or Lamy, L-A-M-Y, Guzelichowski was a chaplain present at a Civil War battle known as the Battle of Glorieta Pass. This was in 1862. That's about 100 miles northwest of Puerto de Luna. The battle was not a huge one with a little more than 1,000 soldiers on each side and around 100 killed and 300 wounded, but it was a decisive battle because the Confederates were defeated there. And that was their last attempt to conquer New Mexico. So that battle ended those attempts. But Guzelichowski had served there, and as a result of him being a priest and Polish, and this is on his gravestone, folks, so we're not being derogatory here,
Right.
he was known as Padre Polacco.
The Polish priest.
Yes, there you go, the Polish priest. So
Fascinating. Okay, do you know this offhand? Is there any Ambrose Bierce connection to any of this?
You know, that's a good question. I didn't look into that, but
Another gentleman who disappeared strangely.
That's right. It's one of my favorite stories that we've done. If you are interested in a fascinating story about a writer of some of the most amazing short stories ever written, Ambrose Bierce, who disappeared, we did do a series on that. So look for that in our back catalog.
Okay. Well, so as Scott said, Padre Polacco had a store in Puerto de Luna, and apparently Billy the Kid frequented the store. Imagine that.
Yeah.
And the Padre supposedly told his store clerks to let Billy take whatever he needed whenever he came in. I'm sure is a survival method too. Like, yeah, everything's for you. Yeah, just for you. Your money's no good here, Mr. Body. Well, Billy had even gone to dances that Guzelichowski had hosted. But the most fascinating bit here is that after Pat Garrett, remember the sheriff, and sports writer, captured Billy on December 23rd, 1880 in Stinking Springs, New Mexico. They need to work on their marketing.
That's now Fort Sumner for people.
Yeah.
Stinking
Springs.
It's not called that anymore. There is a Stinking Springs, but it's different. Where Fort Sumner is where this was for this story.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess a high sulfur content coming from
exactly.
here. So again, yes, Billy the Kid was captured in 1880 in Stinking Springs, New Mexico. And this is about 37 miles southeast of Puerto de Luna. And here, Padre Polacco invited Billy to a Christmas dinner on the 25th, which means Billy had his last Christmas dinner in the same out-of-the-way spot in the middle of nowhere that Jim Sullivan's car would be found abandoned almost 100 years later.
That's crazy.
It's weird.
And that's kind of a famous story. And I knew this story of this Christmas dinner, but I didn't realize, I never dreamed it would be in this tiny town of 150 people where Jim Sullivan disappeared. And now it's been just over exactly 51 years as we're recording this since Jim vanished. In fact, this is Wednesday, March 18th for this week's show. It's been 51 years and 13 days exactly since he disappeared.
There's a lot of overlap, not all the time, but just with weird, seemingly unconnected things. Look at Atchison, Kansas. Okay, so and the birthplace of Amelia Earhart and all the other strange stuff going on there. But it's interesting. Again, I don't know if it's a draw, if it's a fate, but in the big picture here with Jim, we've got a musician who wrote an album about looking up at the sky, singing about cosmic mysteries, and then vanishing into the desert. And then 6 years later, he disappears without a trace outside the Gateway of the Moon, as named by Francisco Vasquez de Coronado. And one of the last spots, Billy the Kid was known to have had a nice Christmas dinner.
Yeah, this really is one of those legends that has lots of legendy details. I mean, Billy the Kid is intersecting here in the middle of nowhere. 150-person town, we have the legend of Billy the Kid intersecting with the legend of the disappearance of Jim Sullivan.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're suggesting there's a connection. I mean, but who knows?
No, I'm not either, but I love that kind of stuff.
No, I love the branches that sometimes you find that, things going off of a timeline or a storyline that are also connecting to other interesting things. And sometimes you wonder, like, are they connected or is it just the spot? But I think the point here is that it's a little more random, perhaps, in that with so much, hundreds of years of population on the East Coast and certainly the Southeast and Northeast, for something like that to happen out in the Southwest with fewer people and less years for history, and human habitation. It's just a little more random and arbitrary, perhaps. But let's now get to the theories. Where do we start?
Well, we always start out with the skeptical stuff, which in this case, that basically posits that Jim simply wandered off into the desert for some unknown reason, died of exposure, and his body was just never recovered.
Yeah.
And truthfully, even though we talked about how remains are scattered, that's completely plausible. The desert is a huge place.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be that unusual.
Right.
It'd really have to be about the reasons that he would have wandered off. The bigger hill to climb there in terms of what you think would have to be about what was he doing. Not that his body vanished in the desert, because that can happen to anybody.
Sure.
But I mean, you got to look at the physical toll this trip was taking on him. He'd just driven 15 hours straight in this noisy, vibrating Volkswagen Bug. He's physically exhausted to the point where the highway patrol actually pulled him over because they thought he was driving under the influence.
Right. Okay. So there are those factors, but then is he so delirious that like, I'm going to wander off 5 miles into the horizon, or not that far? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm going to get, I need to stretch my legs, but I'm going to go a long ways towards hills or whatever, or falls in a ditch. Now, this is what I was getting at earlier, like entirely possible. Strange things happen. The earth swallows everything up eventually.
Yeah.
Odd, unexpected things can happen out in the wild in any condition or terrain, but how likely is this? And then the other thing with that soil, one detail I don't think we've mentioned yet that's often described in retelling of his story here is that footprints were found leading from the car and then just stopping. Now, have you had any confirmation of that?
I have not actually, but it's interesting to me that you've heard that. I'm gonna cross-reference it right now and see.
Again, it could be one of those things that's tacked onto a story to make it a little more mysterious and juicy. But I remember reading several accounts years ago, again, when we were first considering the story and had tripped onto it. It's like, okay, even more mystery gravy onto the Yorkshire pudding here. Is that there's something, like I said, any kind of clue that would be like, that shouldn't happen. And like I said, or just a lot of, again, you go out there, depending on the soil conditions, even if it's dry and dusty, if the wind's not swept them away, you'll see, the car's parked there. There's a lot of footprints around. And generally, I think when, it depends, of course, on the law enforcement personnel, but if it's an abandoned car, they'll take a look around rather than just call the tow truck, is to see what happens. Is there anybody under the car? What's happening? Is there signs of a struggle or violence? Or what's going on here? They'll take a cursory look, and if there's footprints, maybe follow them out. But yeah, I've heard that. I've read that several times throughout the years with the stories that there appeared to be footprints that went out to a certain distance and just stopped.
Well, I just was looking through our sources just now, and I could not find anything on that. So I'm wondering if that is like you said, like an embellishment or something that
could very well be. Yeah.
Because it's funny, again, as I think I told you earlier, Emily, my wife, and I, when we were at lunch today, we were talking about this case, and she had seen a bunch of things about it, and she had heard a lot of stuff that hadn't happened, which makes me think a lot of people are adding layers to this story. But frankly, I also think it's weird enough without that. Footprints or no footprints, like, where did he go? It sort of almost doesn't even matter, but that's, it's interesting to think about that idea.
Hi, I'm Ben, and when I'm not studying mechanical engineering, I'm listening to Astonishing Legends with Scott Philbrick and Forrest Burgess. Let's get back to the show.
So that brings us back to the La Mesa Motel, which we mentioned a bunch of times. This is at 2415 Route 66 in Santa Rosa, still there and open, at least what I could see on Google Street View. But he never actually slept there in the bed. Instead, he ends up driving 23 miles out into the desert south of Santa Rosa near the Genetti Ranch. And this ranch sits deep in the rugged mesa country of Guadalupe County. Now, this is 25 miles, again, driving south, 25 basically, on a back road, essentially. To get there, he had to drive down the Pecos River Valley past Puerto de Luna and turn onto a privately owned, isolated dirt road, where he then went pretty far on that road. And as we said, the Genetti Ranch, that's a working ranch. Yeah. So this is an extremely strange destination for Jim.
Yeah. So, like I said, unless he was just completely delirious, but I would say it was kind of like what I was talking about before. When you have the time, it sounds like Jim doesn't have a lot of time to dilly-dally because the more time on the road, not earning money, is more money out of your pocket. He's got a very limited budget here. So it's not like a
Yeah.
vacation or an open-ended road trip, is that he's got a destination to get to. He's got a wife he's worried about. He's reporting back.
Yeah.
And she's going to want to know, like, well, why aren't you in Nashville yet? You know, like, what's going on? So
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
already expressed some doubts, let's say, or trepidation,
Right.
perhaps. By talking about that earlier, it's like, yeah, sometimes it's kind of cool to take a road not traveled well and just see what's at the end of it. But that's if you have
Right.
time. Because like
Yeah.
I'd driven back and forth to go down to Southern California when going to college. It's like, boy, that road looks so enticing. It just kind of splits between two hills. Like, what's beyond the hills? Like, I won't go very
Yeah.
far. To him turning down this privately owned, isolated dirt road, like you said, and onto a ranch when you're really not invited.
And as we said, the guitar's in the car, the money was in the car, cash
Right.
was in the car.
Yeah.
Miss Janetti saw him and asked if he needed help. He said no. So from a skeptical point of view, you've got this severely sleep-deprived,
Yeah.
possibly highly stressed guy, might be experiencing a minor psychological break or disorientation, walks away from the car, maybe thinking he's just going for a short hike to clear his head, and gets turned around and just never comes back.
Sure, okay, that's it's a pretty simple and I'd say plausible explanation. But like the themes we're talking about, and in his music, was he following something that he saw in the skies? Or was something leading him into this weird path? You know what I'm saying? Like you wouldn't think he would normally drive down there, but was something leading him that direction, or was he following something that he had seen?
Right.
And the conditions, yeah, like I said, the high New Mexico desert we were talking about, especially in early March, it's pretty unforgiving. The temperatures can drop drastically at night. And if you're out there without proper gear, you can experience hypothermia pretty quickly.
And hypothermia causes severe confusion. We've talked
Right.
about that with the Outlaw Pass, and people take off there's paradoxical undressing. People
Right.
take off their clothes. Of course, you would think that we would find the clothes, or somebody would have.
Right.
They might do that, burrow into a cave or under a rock to get warm if he was
Yeah.
feeling that way. If he crawled under a rock or an outcropping or deep into like some scrub brush, he would be very hard to spot, especially if he was passed away. Now, the local police and his brothers conducted huge grid searches. And like we said, Davey Delgado, that local reporter, he was like, no arroyo was unturned.
Right,
but the
right.
reality is the desert's vast.
Yeah.
A body falls into a deep ravine, or if scavengers do a little bit of scattering, you mix that with decomposition and the color of the desert and how the desert floor in a lot of these places, everything on the ground looks like a bone anyway.
Right.
Even natural, branches and everything. Physical traces can disappear pretty quickly.
That's true. The other thing too, like, Volkswagen Bugs have a heater, unless his wasn't working. You could at least stay warm in the car.
That's true.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's pumping in heat from the engine compartment, like a lot of cars do, or through the fluid. But he's got presumably a simple heater that works, and then
Right.
would he wander off far enough from the car, like he can't find his way back, or gets turned around, and even if he was delirious, it's like
Right.
it's not that obscure. You should be able to find
Right.
your way back. Now, a friend of mine who used to DJ out at Burning Man a lot, I was going to say he got really dehydrated once, and he did wander away from camp. He said, yeah, I kind of want, I was at a tent, or DJing, and people are dancing. And then I just kind of wandered away, and he said serious dehydration had set in. And I said, well, it's a desert, it's flat, it's black rock, you can't see the tent. He said, yeah, this is the weird thing for us. He said, I was maybe, 100 yards away. People could see, there's still people wandering around, but like, I could see the tent. I just couldn't figure out how to get back there. He said, I know that doesn't make any sense, but it's like, you're so kind of delirious. It's like, oh, there it is. What do I do? Fortunately,
Right.
people saw him like, dude, you don't look good. Like, you.
Yeah.
And so
you can get that too from low sodium.
yeah.
When your sodium falls really low, you can lose, because that happened to my friend Jerry.
Right.
When he was having health issues, and his wife was rushing him to the hospital from New Jersey into New York City, into Manhattan, and they were headed for the Holland Tunnel or something. She was like, we just got to get through the tunnel. And he looked at her. This is a former public defender,
Right.
lawyer, smart dude. He looked at her and went, what's a tunnel? And that was all just from low sodium and a mixture of dehydration as well. So
yeah. So like I said, if he were under that condition, Jim, it's possible that he did, he's confused. He's a little tired. He just drove onto a road, not knowing where he's going or for what reason.
Right.
Is it that likely, though, that he's,
Right.
possibly, like I said, even you can be dehydrated under any conditions, especially windy desert
Right.
conditions where it's sucking the moisture out of you.
Yeah.
But how likely is that? And that he wanders that far away that he's not found. So to your point here about the just very mundane circumstances, just wanders away, falls into some kind of crack or hole in the ground, this and that, and is never found. It's possible.
Yeah.
And, people do underestimate the desert all the time.
Yeah.
But then that doesn't explain the cryptic phone call to Barbara, right? It doesn't explain why he told her. She wouldn't believe him if he tried to explain why he was waiting around.
So, I have a theory about that and the way that that's perceived that only just occurred to me, honestly. But he could have been talking about some strange unknown event, but he also could have just been talking to his wife about the fact that he got pulled over for being drunk, which they probably did a lot of drinking and drugs, these two that, were in the part of that scene in Malibu or whatever. And the irony was he was just tired. Like maybe that was the story he didn't want to take the time to tell. He's like, you wouldn't believe me if I told you what happened. I'm just going to spend the night. The cops told me I have to crash. I have to spend the night, crash for the evening. But they weren't going to let me leave town tonight because I was weaving or something.
Yeah.
And maybe that was just a story. Because to your point too, and this is something a lot of younger folks are not going to know.
Right.
When you're talking about a pocket full of dimes, when you make a call from a payphone, you only have a certain amount of time to talk before it asks for more money.
Right.
So you don't have change. You're like, the call ends. So he could have just been like, not now. I'll tell you when I get to your sister's house and the phone calls are less expensive or something.
But you do have to wonder, like I said, and again, this is now it's you're putting too fine a point on things perhaps, or, but why did he make the call in the first place when it was just the day, she's like, oh, why?
Well, that could be delirium.
That could be. Yeah. So again, there's a lot of supposition here, and we don't know why. But again, it's just like if you were there, if you really knew him, is that out of the ordinary? And what was he talking about? Where, of course, the theme of our show and where our minds first jump to is when he's saying, you wouldn't believe me, and it prompts a phone call, and I don't have time, like exactly to your point, like, look, this is a 5-minute explanation of something weird I saw. I'll just tell you later when I get to the motel or something, and then just charge to the bill. When you have something extraordinary like that, like what was it that he saw or experienced that he mentioned it in the first place? So is it just like, oh, the cops pulled me. I was just tired. Cops pulled me over. I'm fine now. I'm going to go find a place. Whatever that is, he's waiting around. Like it sets it up. Like I wish he would solve so much of this mystery if he just told her at that point. Like, what do you mean? Like, okay, well then at least, like I said, you'd have a even deeper mystery, or just like, oh, okay. Wasn't aliens. It was a black-eyed person selling roasted peppers at the side of the road. Even that's like, oh, okay, now I get it. All right. You have something a little more still weird but concrete to latch on to.
So that brings us to the next section of our analysis. This comes up online a lot. It's a mundane theory as well, which focuses heavily on foul play. But we do have some information about this. Now, there is the very real possibility that Jim was murdered out there. Santa Rosa was a town about 2,800 people. They were used to drifters pulling off Route 66, but Jim's an outsider. He's got a handlebar mustache, looks like a cowboy, but he's an LA musician. There's a lot of theories actually spread around the town in the aftermath, apparently involving a remote branch of the mafia, small town police, or just maybe running into a completely unsavory figure out in the middle of nowhere. Because it's a lot like when you're out in the desert like that in a nowhere place. It's a lot like being at sea by yourself in a boat, and another boat comes up with people on it who want your boat or your stuff. And there's not a whole lot you can do if you're not ready to defend yourself.
Yeah, that does happen. In those kind of weird scenarios. The 1970s, totally different era for drifters and hitchhikers, as I was talking about earlier. Just a different vibe. It wasn't completely perceived as dangerous as it is now. I mean, like I said, when I was in high school, people still did that. And then it's like, well, you're just pretty lucky. And then you have a lot of naive people like, there's some weird people, but it's cheap and free. And then you meet some really cool people you have a discussion with. And it's like, that goes the other way too, of picking up hitchhikers.
That's right. Yeah.
So I think it just entirely not a good idea either way.
I'll give you a ride, but you got to leave the axe out there.
Even then, So anyway, is that scenario likely with Jim being a big dude, not really needing a ride in this case?
Yeah.
It's still dangerous. If you broke down or walked away from your vehicle, you got to realize you're completely at the mercy of whoever drove past. And in this case, we're talking literal Wild West out here. There's a reason Billy the Kid used to hang out around there.
Yeah, Al Dobbs, the guy who funded Jim's first record, and his friend, the cue card guy from Rowan and
Right.
Martin's Laugh-In, he actually leaned towards the theory that something bad happened to him. He thought maybe Jim stumbled into something that wasn't good.
Yeah.
You know, we know for a fact that bodies get buried out in the desert. We know that.
Yes, a lot of places to dig holes. Well, this is where one of the strangest possible leads in this disappearance emerged. During the search for Jim, a New Mexico paper reported that an unidentified body was found buried in an isolated area about 8 miles west of Las Cruces. The body was nude, badly decomposed, and there was clear evidence of an attempt to cover it up. So foul play was heavily suspected in this case. And the physical description of the victim was a pretty close, if not exact, match for Jim, right down to the height and the facial hair. But, as we said, it turned out not to be Jim. But still, it shows exactly how easy it is for someone to be murdered, buried in the New Mexico dirt, and then completely stripped of their identity. And usually, as we know, being a junior sleuths here, is that there's some connection to the case. You owe somebody money, drug deal gone wrong. There's some familiarity usually with the victim. But did they ever figure out who that was, Scott?
Well, if they did, there's nothing about it that we could find in our research. Also, there's folks out there who can't figure out how it was ruled out to be Jim.
Right.
Forensics in 74 weren't what they are today. And now we're not even sure who that might have been, although some sources say whoever it was positively identified, and again, not Jim. The next question, though, I have for you is, like, his car wasn't broken down, right? We've confirmed that. It was
right.
fine.
So that's what we were saying. Yeah. The answer is no, as far as we know, because the police found his Volkswagen Beetle locked, but also operational. The locked part is interesting.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like, hey, there's nobody else out here. I'm just going to walk away and stretch my legs. So no need to lock the car. I'll be back. Because back then also you need a coat hanger to get your car open. You know, a little easier than it is these days, but he locked it, right? So, and he wasn't out of gas, and the engine was not broken down. So either Jim or someone else drove it 23 miles off the highway, parked it, locked the doors then, and walked away. But someone else being involved in this category, or in this column, there were no witnesses who said they saw anyone other than Jim with the car. Their descriptions matched him with height, weight, the handlebar mustache. He's pretty significant looking character. If you just go, I don't know if we can post any pictures, but he's got a distinctive look. And like you said, he's a stranger. So locals would notice if he was him and if he was with someone else, I think.
Right.
But there were no witnesses, again, who saw Jim with anybody and the car in connection. Their descriptions matched. And then coming back to the forensics and ruling him out as the body, as being the body at Las Cruces. And remember, you know, that's 260 miles away. But that body was, according to our research anyway, described as having both a mustache and a small beard. And Jim did not have a small beard at that time. So ruling him out as the Las Cruces body could have been just, you know, simple as, okay, this dude has a small beard, so it can't be Jim Sullivan. But who knows? Right.
And so coming back to the FAR, that his car is in working order, that changes the potential calculus on his final hours, really. Because if your car breaks down in the freezing desert, your survival instincts kick in. You flag down a person just to stay warm, or is, you know, like you said, maybe it was running. You could stay warm inside of it, but he was never doing that.
Right.
Miss Janetti saw him, asked if he needed help. He said no. Pete Sina offered him a ride. He said no.
Yeah. So he refused any kind of rescue. It didn't seem he needed it. And you don't wave off a ride in those conditions unless you have a specific reason to stay out there.
Yeah.
Or, you know, maybe you're experiencing a severe mental break, or you want to end it there, but there's really no evidence of that either from people who knew him, because again, that's another big theory. But anyway, none of this really, I would say, points directly to a staged disappearance or some kind of fugue state, right?
Yeah.
Jim's son, Chris, said that the failure of that Playboy record marked the dissolution of their family, you know, at least temporarily. But here's the other thing. Jim, again, he's not totally defeated. Jim is driving across the country to start over, and it's a trip full of hope. But I don't know, maybe the pressures of failures he'd had so far just finally broke him. We don't know.
Right. So what you're talking about is a guy walking away from his own life on purpose, just like hitting the reset button, which, by the way, I feel like gets pitched on every true crime show that someone's disappeared. They're always like, oh, they just ran away. You can't file a missing person. They just ran away. They started a new life. And I just want to say, having watched, because my wife watches them obsessively, 5 billion true crime shows, I feel like twice the person intentionally disappeared.
Yeah.
That's never the thing. It's never at the end, they never go, yeah, this person disappeared on purpose. It's like 1% of the time, but it always gets pitched like it's every time. It's kind of irritating.
No, look, it's just story angle. And you and I very well know that there's producers who, from the network notes, they have to come up with a list of a certain number of
Raise
angles.
The stakes.
Yeah, you have to, they want drama, they want mystery. It's like, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I don't know. And so
maybe they did, Keith Morrison.
But then what happened? So, the idea is that, you want this kind of thing because it creates viewership. In this case, I can't say that this is a story that everybody's kind of trying to goose for some kind of monetary reason, at least. And so when you're talking about, there's also patterns, yes, you're right. I've seen now, actually even recently, where there's a woman who took off and started a new life in Florida. I'm sure you've seen, this is only like last month.
I just saw, like yesterday, I saw this, yes. But she had amnesia, right?
Oh, no, this is a woman who...
I saw where a woman actually had amnesia, and they found her in Alaska or something, like 30 years later, she had 4 kids and married and didn't remember, she was a journalist, and didn't remember anything about her old life.
Oh, that's
like
fascinating.
Nothing.
Yeah, no, it's possible.
And it was a weird case, they said.
This is, aside from all the other stuff, this is a case where a woman had taken her daughter when she was young and lived a new life in Florida. And I think where the daughter didn't realize her dad was still alive. And so that was a reunion. But this is the part.
Oh, yes.
Me
I remember
being
that one too.
The part that I enjoyed the most. I'm
too.
glad justice has been served. The daughter, she loved her dad. Her dad was always never stopped looking for her. So it was kind of heartwarming. But the fact I love is that there's a police body cam where they confront the woman in her driveway. And there's the neighbor lady who's like, if she were of that age and being a guy, Scott and I would call a coin jingler or a key jangler. I made that distinction.
Yes.
Just a lovely, well-meaning person who just loves to chat, but she comes up,
and also considers themselves an expert on many subjects.
Yeah, they just don't tell you about chew the fat while they're jingling coins in their pocket. But the lady comes up like, "Hey, Barb, looks like the cops got you. They're here for you." And then
I would just be like, "Take me away."
Yeah,
please.
the cop said. Because, we actually are here for her. She goes, no. It's like, well, can you imagine? Like, she makes that dumb joke, and then
it's like
the dad joke, like, no, they really are here for. They really are here to pick her up, and then the shock look on her face. Anyway, getting back to this, it's like, okay, so how I always look at this, like, how likely are these scenarios here?
Right,
walking away, no note, maybe, but like back then. It's leading up to some kind of hope, not that, I'm going to go back to I'm going to be a short order cook in some small town. Didn't seem to happen here.
Yeah.
So, I don't think that's very likely. But, the writer we mentioned earlier, John Dale, analyzing Jim's lyrics, specifically the song Highways, he noted that in that track, Jim sings about finding comfort in being physically and spiritually lost. He sings about the fantasy of escape, that giddy rush you get from being invisible again and not owing anyone anything. All your debts are gone. But then you got, how is he going to get money to start a new life? But Dale notes that song sounds exactly like Jim making a promise to disappear one day. So maybe he got out to New Mexico and then he just realized he couldn't do it anymore. He didn't want to go to Nashville and then have the risk of failing again at his chosen calling and disappointing his family once again. Okay, that is just one scenario.
No, right. He locks his ID, his records, his guitar in the car, walks away, completely blank slate, although nowhere near a bus station or anywhere to like take off and like start a new life.
No, it's just,
I guess in 1975, there's this idea. Oh well, he could assume a new name, get a cash paying job as a ranch hand somewhere, and just quietly live out the rest of his days off the grid. But of course, at that point, he's walking out on his wife and son.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, a billion people have done, but I don't know. Also, why lock the car in that? Why even close the door and roll up the windows? Why not just, if you're walking away, what's the point in like parking the car like you're coming back to it after you get out of the grocery store? That doesn't make sense either.
And you don't leave your ID, okay? Like,
right. And
right.
Cash. Like you take the cash
Not
is
only
the perfect
cash,
invisible way to get help.
You're going to start a new life, go pawn the guitar, which is...
Right. Worth more than the car.
Yeah, it's like that. Yeah. Okay, so that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. All right. It's all like kind of romantic, I guess.
Right.
And it gives him some control over his own fate instead of making him a victim of the elements or a murder victim. But in the Occam's razor column,
say that.
Which,
I know. Don't.
People would maybe argue.
Yeah.
And this would be outside of that in its totality. But I mean, the dude dedicated an album to highways, desert UFOs or whatever, and now his car is abandoned 120 miles north of Roswell.
Well, it depends on what you believe in. If you don't believe in aliens are possible, then it's just that's a bunch of baloney. But again, getting back to your point about, well, I guess the thematic things that are being brought up about romanticism of being lost and following something that takes you to a new experience, let's say, and the very just the very base part of that. Maybe that's part of it. Like I said, that kind of let me put it this way. I guess we know he has that sense of wonder in a poetic songwriter kind of way. These kind of big ideas that are swirling around in his head that lets him open. And being the opposite, somebody like, nope, I got to get to the destination. We're not doing any kind of shenanigans here. He might be that kind of wanderlust feeling of something that led him out there. And I guess it's what that's what I'm getting at, is that he has a looseness rather than like, nope, we must maintain a schedule on the road here. I have to get back. I have to sleep exactly 7.5 hours and then get back on the road. He's not that kind of guy. So that kind of romanticism, that's part of it, but he doesn't strike me as being irresponsible either.
Yeah. Well, here's the theory that a lot of people believe, that he left in a UFO. Like, and then maybe he was getting, like you said, some kind of psychic message, or he was following a craft out there to the middle of nowhere, which honestly, when you look at all the reasons the car might have been in the middle of nowhere, that one, aside from the being dazed and confused one, on the fringy side, the idea of him following something in the sky kind of makes the most sense about, like, why would he have been so far from anything out here?
Yes.
Right? That it's like, that might be a good reason to be like, he was following something. Maybe he saw something, or maybe something was calling him, and it's like, come on, forget the guitar, forget everything. Yeah. You're going on a trip.
Okay, let's take that at face value, because you know what? Barbara actually believed this theory too.
Yeah.
Now, yes, we know she's like a lot of folks of that era, of a very metaphysical and I'd say new age is such a bad rap, but a metaphysical interest and bent that she's open to entertaining that idea as well as Jim. And so it's kind of curious to me still about the call, and that I think he saw or experienced something not threatening, but wondrous. And you could say, like, not wondrous and like it's all wonderful and it's puppies, kitties, and rainbows, but something intriguing, like, whoa, I don't know what this is, but like, you got my attention. And wanting to call Barbara, but not having enough time to talk about it. I don't want to get into it now, but you wouldn't believe me, but I saw something that I think has meaning to it.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you later about that, because it's a long conversation.
Yeah.
But getting back to Barbara, she said he wasn't dealing with, heavy drug use or anything like that, but that she and Jim were very much of their times, as we were saying, and they believed in reincarnation and astrology, and are open to these metaphysical ideas. Chris Sullivan said that his mother was thoroughly convinced that Jim was up in the stars somewhere, just waiting for her. And Chris is the son, right?
Yeah, that's the son. So,
again, to reiterate that. So Barbara is believing that he's out there somewhere. And I kind of like that. It's a little like a Starman or Star Lord.
Yeah. Oh, Star Lord.
He's out,
hilarious.
Yeah. Well, that he's what I'm saying, like, he's out there somewhere. The dad.
Yeah.
Is out there somewhere.
Leaving the stuff in the car does kind of point to Jim being the guy who parked it. Because that's another thing that I thought about as we were going through this. Because if it had been a thief or even somebody from the mafia who killed him, whatever, they would have definitely stolen at least the cash and or the guitar or both, whatever. So, and we mentioned this, by the way, the mafia theory is actually a dead end. It was built on a persistent local rumor claiming the family that owned the ranch, the Genettis, had ties to organized crime. People speculated Jim owed gambling debts or crossed the wrong people in the LA club scene, and they used that New Mexico property to dispose of him. But when private investigators dug into the property records for that ranch, there was no evidence of any of that. No evidence to support a mob connection. So that's really just kind of more of a local rumor.
That's interesting. I just remembered, speaking of true crime shows, just watched, it was a few months ago, but a very intriguing case about a law enforcement officer meeting a mysterious end in Mountain Air, New Mexico, I believe. And another friend who's been through there or is familiar with it said, like, oh yeah, it's been well known that there's a lot of like either local organized crime or mafia connections there. Like a lot of shady business in this really lovely little town. And so they kind of note like, really? It's like, yeah. It's just kind of because it's out of the way. There's not a lot of eyes on you. And then you can really control and clamp down on any kind of authorities there. If you can corner that market, you can run the place. So yeah, there's like, I just surprised that, not that I haven't heard that about other small towns in weird areas like Little Rock, Arkansas, like being a retirement place, like they got to go somewhere. Right. But there's still, there's other little areas that are, have their dark secrets. So again, a lovely place with some weird stuff going on.
Well, by disappearing, Jim immortalized himself. By hook or by crook, it's made him a legend all these years later. And again, like you and I were talking about at the beginning of the show, we were both very young, but we don't remember a lot of news about this. And that was because at the time, he wasn't really an established musician. He was a guy that had tried and not hit it, and he disappeared in the desert like a ton of other people in the 60s and 70s. So he found his fame later in death or in his disappearance. His music finally found the audience it always deserved. So whether he wandered off, he met with foul play, chose to start over, or he was beamed up into the stars, this legend of his disappearance is what finally put his work on the map in a much deserved way.
He became exactly what he sang about in a way, a ghost haunting his own masterpiece, you could say. And sometimes, the deepest mysteries are hiding right there in the grooves of that vinyl on your record shelf. So, final summation here, Scott. What do you think happened?
I don't know. There's one other detail that I wanted to mention before now, and I actually forgot about the car. I couldn't find anything that said where the car keys were. Where were the keys to the bug? The door was locked, but it didn't say that the keys were locked inside, which I feel like if they had been, that somebody would have said that. So maybe he disappeared with the keys, which could be the thing that doesn't biodegrade if he's just dead out in the desert somewhere. Maybe eventually we'll find the keys to his car. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine they find the keys and then they go to whatever junkyard that bug is sitting in and it fits. And then they're like, oh, these are Jim Sullivan's keys.
Well, do you know where that car is now?
No. And that's me. I'm always like, where's the car? But my thought, at first I was like, oh, it's probably just sitting, rusting away, or it could be a shell of its former self. Somewhere in Puerto de Luna or in Santa Rosa, more likely, wherever the closest junkyard might be. Or if it's an operating bug, it works. And after the case was done, somebody could have just sold it. The police could have sold it or auctioned it, and it could be anywhere. So like, we'd have to find the VIN number or something. And I guess, Barbara passed away in 2016, which is sad. She is in that short documentary that we'll have a link to.
Yeah.
But maybe they're reunited now. I don't know. It's a sad story in the big picture, but and the detail that got me onto the keys was the hotel room. The key to his room was locked in the room. So that's another dimension. Like it's like, so why was it locked in the room? Did he screw up and he locked it in there and then he couldn't get back in? But like, if you could, why wouldn't you just go to the front desk and be like, I locked my key in my room? Why was his key locked in the room? That's a question I don't really know the answer to. It's another layer to this mystery.
Yeah, you just mentioning that room again, I was going to, it reminds me a little bit. You remember a great short series that our very good friend, Dr. Rich Haddam had been a producer and writer on, called The Lost Room
Oh, yes.
with Peter Krause. And it deals with a remote motel where along Route 66 when in the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
And it exists outside of like normal time and space. It's kind of a portal area or a junction box, you could say, to other places and realities. I'll just leave it at that. Go look it up, folks. Go watch it. I was able to find it streaming somewhere. Great cast. Also Juliana Margulies, Dennis Christopher, Elle Fanning, and also the Count of St. Germain, Mr. Kevin Pollak.
Yes.
So,
Came on our show and admitted that he was the Count of St. Germain.
Yeah, there you go. Mystery solved. But yeah, it's a room that his daughter gets lost inside that room, and he goes out on a mission, and the daughter's played by Elle. And he has this key to the room. Then you need to find other objects to make these connections and get your way back. So it was just kind of fascinating. But it's leading to my theory that something happened to Jim. He saw something, and I don't know if that's on the ground with another person or being or something in the sky. I would say the most, how likely is any of this? The most likely thing is that he saw something perhaps in the sky, which, again, if you're going to go down that road where it's all thematically tied to his music, his creation, his vision, his any prophecies or whatever he may have had, intuitions, that there was something about the skies. What bigger, better skies do you have than New Mexico, right?
Right.
He saw something, though, or something happened to him that didn't totally freak him out, but it was remarkable, and that he may have questioned about it or wanted to know more about it. And looking at the other mundane things, yeah, I think they're all plausible, sure, but they're just odd. So if you're willing to entertain something just slightly paranormal or something out of the unusual area, because again, we get into that area where, and I'm starting to think this more because of this conversation that we're having globally about the existence of reality. And you and I are tripping onto this more about alternate realities, other places, parallel dimensions and universes, the upside down, whatever it is that's happening in popular culture now, is that there are other planes of existence, and sometimes you can fall into them. We've heard about the Ambrose Bierce story, right? Or the farmer disappearing in his field. People just kind of disappearing or falling into another shade just behind a curtain that's invisible, and then not being found. And then they're somewhere else, and hopefully they're alive somewhere, but they're beyond this world or divided or sealed off. And I think something he saw lured him to that location, because the other explanations don't make all that much sense to me. Not that they're not likely or impossible.
Yeah.
They're just that something lured him to that spot where he was searching for something.
Yeah, I agree with you.
My point being is that what we think is paranormal or supernatural is part of the phenomenon. I always looked at electronic fog, and that I came to believe as a very rare, but in a way also a very natural kind of thing that happens. There's no demonic forces controlling that. It's just like in those conditions that can happen, and it's breaking the rules of physics as we know it, which is proven because as we said with electronic fog, their time from takeoff to landing is charted. They're 45 minutes beyond what's possible.
Look in our archives for that show title, folks, if you want to know what we're talking about there. Yeah.
So these things happen. Did he, in his quest, get led or just naturally got tired, wandered into some kind of portal, some kind of slippage through the cracks of into another existence that he just disappeared into?
Maybe he came back. How about this? What if he then popped back in April and they towed his car off and he was like, great. And then he just died in the desert because there was no way to get anywhere at that point.
Yeah. I have to get to an ATM on the other side.
I left it right here.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I'll be back for a little bit. And then I'll be back for a little bit turns into decades. But I get it. Who knows? But I think it's also a possibility that he is somewhere else, maybe not physically taken up by a UFO. Who knows? That's also perhaps a possibility, as we may find out in the next year or so. But also, he could have just slipped into another, like I said, a naturally occurring tear in our existing reality into someplace else.
Well, folks, I'll leave you with this. The first thing I would say is if you have a record player, get this record. Go to lightintheatticrecords.net and get the U.F.O record. You might get the self-titled Jim Sullivan one too, it's different. I prefer the U.F.O one, his premiere album, produced by his good friend, cue card holder from Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, Mr. Dobbs. Pick it up. It's really great. It's a great pressing. It's heavy grain vinyl, that redo that Light in the Attic did. But I think my favorite thing from this, and which I'm going to close out on, is from one of our pieces of research. It was an article from the Rodeo magazine, which is a British magazine that showcases best in this from their website in new music across genres of alternative, indie, and Americana, which obviously they had, one of their journalists had written an article about Jim Sullivan back when this album was reissued. His name is Nick Eichen, and he had a quote in that article, which I think it would be nice to close on, which is, "Whatever happened in the sand stayed in the sand, only to be blown away by the wind." That's going to wrap up episode 326 of Astonishing Legends. We're dark the next 2 weeks, but we'll be back on April 11th with the first of 3 weeks in a row. In the meanwhile, look for new episodes of the Dead Letter Office weekly on Tuesdays, and keep an eye on our Patreon for early and commercial-free versions of all of our shows, and the Astonishing Junk Drawer, a Patreon-exclusive show that we just posted a new episode of on the current rash of Bigfoot sightings in Portage County, Ohio.
Astonishing Legends is edited by Sarah Voorhees-Wendell at VW Sound. Our co-producer is Tess Feifel, who also leads our research efforts and manages our social media. And we're grateful for the hard work of our technical producer, Ed Vicola, behind the scenes. Special thanks to our announcer, John Boland, for lending his voice to our shows.
Hi, I'm Michael.
Jeffries, Jeff.
Hi, I'm Emma.
And I'm Daniel, her daddy.
I understand this is with no implied promise of present or future compensation.
M-I.
E-R-I-E.
All right, we can try it one more time on the same recording.
Our theme, which is available as a ringtone, was composed by Judson Crane at foundermusic.com. All other music and sound design for the show is composed and created by Alan Carestia.
Our logo was created by Tommy Beaver Design, and our animated graphics for social media and YouTube are done by Joshua Sloan at deadstreetproductions.com.
Many episodes have transcripts available. For ones that don't, you can request them by emailing transcripts at astonishinglegends.com.
Astonishing Legends would not be possible without you, our listeners. Visit our store at astonishinglegends.com or interact with us and other listeners on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Discord, and YouTube.
You can also visit us at patreon.com/astonishinglegends, where patrons have access to commercial-free versions of both the main show and the Dead Letter Office, as well as additional bonus content, including the Patreon-exclusive show, The Astonishing Junk Drawer. No part of this show may be reproduced anywhere without permission. Copyright Astonishing Legends Productions.
Good night.